Thank you, everybody, and welcome. It's always nice to see quite a lot of people in the public gallery. You're very welcome. To those of us here, and those perhaps in the conference hall, and also welcome to those watching us on YouTube. For those in the building, I just need to remind you of the safety procedures. If there is a fire alarm, if you leave by the nearest door and then gather by the cathedral, that's the procedure. Thank you. And I also need to remind you that, as with any council meeting, please treat each other with due courtesy, tolerance and respect. Thank you. So the first item on the agenda today is apologies for absence. I've received apologies from Councillors Don Alexander, Councillor Ali, Councillor Breckle, Cheney, Craig, Davies, Dyer, English, Fitzgibbon, Hume, Rippington and Y. That's quite a long list. It's certainly the longest list I've ever come across, and I think it must be indicative of the bad time of year and everybody's laid low with lurgies. Are there any other apologies? Nope. Thank you. So, agenda item 3 is declarations of interest. Please, can I ask, do any councillors have any interest to declare regarding the items on today's agenda? That's a no. Thank you. Agenda item 4, which is the minutes of the previous meeting. I move that the minutes of the previous meeting of full council held on the 21st of February 2023 be agreed as a correct record. Do I have a seconder?
Seconded, Lord Mayor.
Thank you. Can I take it then that the minutes are agreed? Thank you. Item 5 on today's agenda is the Lord Mayor's business. You'll probably be quite delighted to know that the Lord Mayor has no business and will swiftly move on to public forum. So, public forum is an item where we have 30 minutes. It is split into 2 sections, 15 minutes for petitions and statements and 15 minutes for questions. Details of the petitions, the statements, the questions, all of those that have been received have already been published on our website. So, the way we do it is I will go through the list, calling out those who have indicated that they planned to attend the meeting. Speakers are asked to pay attention to the traffic lights, which are here at each end of the dais, and we ask you to start wrapping up when the lights turn amber. There was one public forum petition received for this meeting, which should be now displayed on the screen. And I now would like to invite Lizzie Sims to speak to her petition for 1 minute. Do we have Lizzie? Thank you.
Hello. I would like the council to provide a crossing or lollipop person on Ashley Down Road for the families of Brunel Field Primary. If you want to encourage children to walk to school, you must provide a convenient and safe way for them to get there. The 2 sets of lights already on Ashley Down Road are not convenient for many of the families that cross Ashley Down Road to go up Arthur Milton Street, and therefore we are trying to cross this dangerous, busy road every day, twice a day. The speed limit on Ashley Down Road is 20 miles per hour, but without any traffic calming measures or cameras, vehicles regularly exceed this. There is also the 70 bus stop, so the bus is often pulling in, making crossing dangerous. Please will you consider putting in a crossing or a lollipop person for these families? Otherwise, I'm just going to end up getting more grey hairs, and I don't want to risk that. Thank you.
Thank you, Lizzie. Thank you very much, Lizzie. So, there were a total of 61 public statements received. They will all be displayed on the screens now. Of those 61, 7 members of the public have indicated that they planned to attend and speak to their statements. And the statements will be displayed on the screen, and we will run through those statements in the order that they were received. Now, I invite each person to speak for 1 minute, and I have to say that as the ex-teacher in me, I would say that Lizzie has modelled what we want absolutely perfectly. She spoke for just a minute. She spoke about what was passionate for her, and she didn't reread her statement because everybody has read those. So absolutely great start to today. Thank you. So the first person we have is who's put a statement in and wants to speak to it is Alderman Colin Smith.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'm here to speak to my statement I put in a couple of weeks ago. bringing to your attention the retirement of my friend and colleague and your friend and colleague, Harold Clark, who's been the chaplain to the council, to the Lord Mayor and to the community of the City Council for 24 years. Harold is retiring on the 9th of April, and I wanted to make sure that he was given an appropriate send-off by all of the people here, whether you have been to the Lord Mayor's Chapel or not. I invite you to join me in a round of applause for Harold's 24-year service to this council, along with his lady wife, Margaret, who is the power behind the throne in the Lord Mayor's Chapel. Thank you.
Thank you. I would like to endorse everything that was said there. Harold is my personal chaplain, and I have to say he's the best personal chaplain I've ever had. And I would like to thank you for your 24 years of service. And I also would like to say that everybody should go to the Lord Mayor's Chapel because it's very beautiful. Thank you. Can I now move on to, do we have Leslie Powell, please, who's here to speak to their statement? Stop the closure of Red Catch Community Garden. Leslie?
5 years ago, we took over the derelict bowling green, classed as agricultural land, and turned it into a successful social value community space using personal funds and crowdfunding. This same space that stood empty and barren is now hugely valued by the community, yet costs the council nothing. We cover overheads with income from events and the cafe so that we can subsidise these projects which the public sector struggle to deliver, and other community benefit projects. We are also subsidised by around 250 volunteer hours per week. So here we have a not-for-profit organisation that has little in reserve, has created 16 jobs, provides an estimated 1 million per annum in social value to the community, now being asked to increase its rent from £300 per annum to 16 grand. Our current licence runs out in December as the council failed to renew it last summer, which means some funders will not consider us further. We have no draft lease to peruse, and time is running out. 16 people could lose their jobs in the next few months because of the council's greed and inability to respond timely to support such a valuable community
I'm going to have
asset.
to ask you to wind up, please.
I wonder what our funders, service beneficiaries and wonderful community in the press will make of the above.
Thank you. Do we have Jill Turner?
On the 5th of July 2022, full council agreed the Silver Motion, which stated that this council recognises that trans women are women and trans men are men. On the face of it, this appears to be a binding decision with legal effect. Lord Mayor, you have now written and said that it is not a binding decision and that it has no legal effect. In order to ensure that the public are not misled, we need you to publicly confirm that this is the case at this meeting. We also need you to confirm that members of staff and teachers who believe that sex is binary and immutable can express their views without any fear of discrimination, detriment, or sanction. If you could do that this evening, we would be very pleased.
I can thank you for your statement. Can I move on now to Josephine Robinson, please?
Good evening, Mayor Rees, and good evening, Council. I spoke to you last in December 21 about the plant-based treaty, asking the Council to endorse it. It was launched in August 21, and I'm here again tonight to talk about that. Kerry McCarthy for Bristol East said, "We know that producing plant-based food results in far fewer emissions, is better for nature and is a healthier option than meat. We need a public debate as to how this can best be achieved. So I am pleased to see advocates for the plant-based treaty setting out some proposals as to how we can stop stalling and start to act." In July last year, Haywards Heath was the first UK town council to endorse the treaty, a Conservative-led council, followed by Edinburgh, the first capital city who held a debate and voted only after they had published an impact assessment report for the councillors to consider. Would Bristol consider publishing its own impact assessment report for the consideration of yourself and Bristol councillors? I really feel that would move us forward. Thank you.
Thank you for your statement. I'd now like to ask Samira Abdi Shukri to speak on the Redcliffe housing conditions.
Hello, good evening. Thank you very much for letting me or give us this opportunity to talk about our issue and problems. I was bidding for 9 years and I was in Home Choice for 9 years. 4 years I was in Band 2 higher, and I have 5 kids who's 19, 18, 17, sharing 1 bedroom, and a boy 11 years old. My daughter 6 years old, sharing with me and the dad. And the house is very overcrowding, and there is no any spaces for the kids. The problem is the Home Choice, as I was feeling that there is neglect toward us and toward many families who live in Redcliffe. When I bid, there are always empty houses in Hartcliffe, always in Hartcliffe. But when I bid the houses next to my area, Redcliffe, I live in Redcliffe, like Totterdown, like Ashley, this area, I'm always too far. But Hartcliffe, they always offer me Hartcliffe. So when I found them, I say, why is Hartcliffe? They say, this is the only house we have, the 4-bedroom. So it's not fair at all, because I was bidding for 9 years. And the kids now, they're grown up, 19, 18, 17, sharing 1 bedroom, always there are problems, always problems.
Thank you, Samira, for coming today. I have read a lot of statements today about housing conditions generally, and I know that the Mayor will have read those statements too. So thank you for making a statement here today. We also have a statement from Nemo Abdi.
Okay. Yeah, Nemo would like me to speak it for her.
Fair enough.
So she says she's lived in her 3-bedroom flat for nearly 15 years with her husband and her 8 children. They first reported problems with water entering the flat in November 22, and for 2 months they lived with water in 2 bedrooms, the kitchen and the bathroom, and for 1 month they didn't have any light in the kitchen or one of the bedrooms. The electric was giving shocks and water was dripping through the light. She reported it as an emergency, but repairs said it was not an emergency. Somebody came out and said it was safe, but there was water still dripping through the light fitting. They were in a hotel for 3 weeks and then moved to another hotel for 2 weeks, and then a temporary flat with 4 bedrooms for 2 months. The flat and underdown house has still not been repaired, and 2 months underwater means that basically everything inside is completely ruined. No work has yet started on repairing the property, and they're due to move back into the flat on the 24th of April. She's really worried that the work will not be completed in time, that they're due to move back in, and they'll be back in the property that is damp and overcrowded. None of the children want to return to the property, and they're in accommodation now where they're finally able to study. Her son starts university in September.
Can I ask you to wrap up, please?
Will do. One of her children is severely asthmatic, and there's no space for him to sleep. She's on Home Choice searching for a 4-bedroom property, but it's still 30 or 40 in the queue.
Okay, thank you.
Somewhere safe to live.
And we do now have Kadra Hassan, Is Kadra here? If you can keep yourself to 1 minute, please. Your microphone's not on.
Can you hear me? Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Yes, Kendra would like me to say this for her as well. So she's a single parent living in a 2-bedroom flat with 2 children aged 5 and 7. They've got water coming in as well for the last 15 months. They've been asking for repairs for a very long time. One of her children is autistic, and she couldn't give him a bath in the bathroom for 7 months as it was too cold as they cut the cable to the heater during the repairs. So they had to take a baby bath into the living room as it's the only room in the flat that's warm enough. Water's coming down and plaster's falling off, and the baby's trying to eat it from the floor. He's too scared to go to the toilet because of the black mold in the room, and he's had to go back to nappies. They sleep downstairs in the living room as it's the only room that they can sleep in.
Thank you. Okay. I just need to say that, you know, the purpose of this public forum is for you to have the opportunity to come here to speak directly to your elected officials. So I know that the Mayor and Tom and all of us are here are listening to you today. And thank you very much for coming. That's the end of the statements. We'll now move on to public questions received. The questions that were received have been published on the website and should be shared on the screen now. We had 24 questions from 22 members of the public. 12 of those have indicated that they wished to attend. I'll try to cover as many questions as possible in 15 minutes, which is allowed for this section of the meeting. It may not be possible for everyone to speak, so we ask for your patience as we run through the questions in order. When I call on you, please read your question out, and we will try to show the question on the screen. The Mayor will then reply verbally. Following the response from the Mayor, you'll be invited to ask a supplementary question. So first of all, Leslie Powell, please may you ask your question.
I understand that the land which constitutes Redcatch Community Garden was classed as agricultural at inception of the garden licence, hence £300 per annum rent. With the rent proposal now on the table at £16,000, 5,000% increase, when was the land recategorised and revalued to what? Should I read the second one?
Would you like to want to answer that question first?
Yeah, I will share that I don't know if there's been some miscommunication, but the whole conversation around Redcatch Park has moved on some ways from the numbers and the situation you're describing. At the moment, as we've been through in members forum earlier on, Ellie is scheduled to come and meet with people for some of the organisers of Redcatch Park to talk through the situation and to work out a way of, of finding a fair resolution, one that enables people to keep doing what they're doing, it enables the city to keep benefiting from the work that's going on there, but allows us as an authority to be financially responsible with council land and council assets. So I think it's probably quite important for us all to get up to speed and make sure we're dealing with the same truth as to where those conversations and negotiations are. I'm not going to preempt what conversation will happen next week, but there is a commitment to get to a resolution.
Okay.
Thank you for that.
Do you have a supplementary?
I do. So just to follow on what you're saying, I completely agree that things have moved on since the 1st of March when I sent these questions in. There's a lot of battling backwards and forwards with us having to communicate with 6 different parts of the organisation. And the last offer was for £8,000 per annum rent. But there's no justification. You keep talking about an asset. There was no asset 5 years ago. It was a derelict bowling green in a public
So, Leslie, can I remind you that if you need to ask a question?
So what I'm saying is, even at £8,000, how do you think that we're going to afford that? We're a community organisation that provides £1 million worth of value.
We'll let the Mayor answer that question now. Thank you.
Well, all land is an asset. All our buildings are assets, whether they're being exploited in whatever state of repair they're on. Obviously, they can carry liabilities, but they are things that the council owns and is there. And we, as political leaders, are not owners of that. We are custodians for a period of time. And that's one of the reasons we have to be very rigorous with our own internal processes as to what we do with those assets that will be picked up by future administrations and future generations as well. That's why we have to be careful. What I will acknowledge, and Ellie will too, as we look back at the process and with a very large organisation, we've not necessarily been fully satisfied with multiple points of communication and the approaches that have been had. And the truth is that as political leaders, we sometimes wrestle with the organisation ourselves to make sure it responds to people in a way that we think is a good reflection of the way we want to be interacting with the city. But as I said, there's a conversation to be had next week. There's an absolute commitment to empower our community-based organisations. I say you can find us, we've written this, having worked in the voluntary sector myself, we are believers in the fact that the voluntary sector is a good in and of itself in Bristol, not just to pick up on the gaps where public sector services cannot provide, but we believe that voluntary community sector organisations can work with people in ways that public sector organisations sometimes cannot or will not. So we believe they're a good in and of themselves, and we'll work to make sure that as best as we can with the resources we have, to make sure they have the space and resources to be able to do so. But it's a complex city with multiple challenges. We hope that we can all share an understanding of our collective challenges and again, next week get to a resolution.
Thank you. We have Sian Ellis-Thomas with a question. Sian here.
Hi. Further to that, Mayor, do you not think it would be more sensible to accept the offer of affordable rent that's been offered from the community garden to allow it to sustain its growth and become resilient in order to continue to support the community, rather than insisting on an unsustainable rent that would result in it closing down?
I think the approach has to be to have a conversation around what's possible. Again, I raised Red Catch Park earlier on in response to a question about the Harbour, as well. None of these conversations that we have about particular parts of the city and revenue raising in Bristol happen in isolation. Even the act of the council raising revenue is sometimes looked on as a bad thing, but that revenue goes into the funding of services that then people campaign to have in place. The funding model for local government requires us now to generate revenue so we can fund services that people campaign for. So I'm not going to sit up here and set the rent. What I'm going to say is I think it's important that the people running the park have a conversation with our asset transfer team, with Ellie and with other council officers, think about the future trajectory of the work, and look at opportunities to raise revenue in a site and come to an agreement on a rent that is responsible for everyone, keeps the service and the intervention in place, but actually is responsible with council assets and council finances.
Thank you. Do you have a supplementary?
Yes, I do. In order to help mitigate some of the park costs, the garden organisation have offered to take over responsibility of opening and closing the park gates and the public toilets, which, as well as saving man hours, would reduce the incidence of the toilets being vandalised. Does the Mayor not accept that saying this saving is irrelevant because the cost is met from a different budget shows the council in a very poor light? Surely a saving is a saving.
Well, I wouldn't draw an absolute truth from an individual incident, but I don't think that shows a joined up local authority. And I think that we should have a look at how those budgets, bounce off each other for one council, approach, and we will have a look at that. But there are some areas in which the authority performs well, and inevitably when we have over 5,000 staff, there are some areas in which things don't go well as we would have wished as an administration. So we'll include that in the mix in the conversations next week.
Thank you. And we have a final question on this topic from Kate Swain. Is Kate here? Okay. I'll move on then. Do we have James Jones? A question on plant-based catering. It's question 9.
I've compounded my question slightly, so it's a bit shorter. On July 12, 2022, myself and other Bristol residents spoke regarding agenda item 14, the renewal of council catering contracts with Cafe Gusto, Parsnip Mash and Pegasus until December 2023. In that meeting, we voiced our concerns regarding the consumption of meat and dairy and its effect on the climate crisis. Myself and others are not alone in raising these concerns. Exeter City Council also recognised this issue and took the initiative to successfully carry a motion in December last year to cater fully plant-based meals and to actively mitigate the effects of climate breakdown. Last July, Councillor Craig Cheney explained...
We do need... This is supposed to be a question, so can you get to it, please? Thank you.
Councillor Craig Cheney explained that the Council's resistance to amending the catering contracts was largely due to logistics and stating that myself and others should return in 2023 once all contracts...
I think we're going to have to go to the question, so it's
okay, so will the Council do that?
Well, it's up there. Plant-based catering. That's the question.
Will the Council change the contracts to make them plant-based?
What I would say is that we're certainly taking it into account as part of the work we're doing to deliver on our climate strategy and our ecological strategy for the city, both of which talk about not only what we do within our city boundaries and our own internal city systems to reduce the impact we have on the loss of biodiversity and reduce our emissions, but also talk about the impact we have within wider systems, the wider food systems and transport systems and energy systems that we impact into. We recognise the carbon price that's paid for meat production. We also have to work with the fact that the council works in a complicated world, and we don't have everything our own way, but we try and press through. What I would say about our approach as well, because there was a reference to us really setting establishing norms. We've done a lot on food. I won't give you the list now. I'm sure we can share it with you. But on so many fronts that we face within the city in which we're trying to make change, we also, and you have a role in this, we have to work out how we take people with us without going at the pace of the slowest. That is a challenge we face all the time. I use that phrase a lot around the Colston statue, at the time. So we'll do what we do. It'd be great if you continue campaigning yourself as well to create the conditions in which quicker action is possible.
Thank you. Do you have a supplementary?
So I just would like to ask, why is this so difficult? Other councils are doing it. It just doesn't make any sense as to why this is just getting stopped at every single hurdle. Anyone that campaigns for this or anyone that speaks is just told, no, pretty much, blah, blah, blah. Council does something similar, but not this.
So I think things are already happening, but it is also true that we have a number of emergencies that we work on in the city that require scarce council resource. There's a lot of work on knife crime in the city. There's a lot of work on county lines. We've just heard interventions here on the quality of some of our estate, and the housing conditions people are living in that we're putting resource into tackling, working on building homes. We've had questions around rough sleeping. There's a lot of things that we do as an organisation as a matter of urgency. And by definition, and it's something that the Chamber will be grappling with as it moves into the new system, you can't have 122 priorities. We have to focus the resources. The immediate emergency that we've been tackling over the last few years in the council is making sure people can eat at all, including our own staff, making sure we're paying a living wage and bringing through a number of those interventions. So this is a consideration. I won't go through. I mean, we've got the Better Eating Award in the city. We have our options in our council cafeteria. There haven't actually been many members of staff in over the last few years anyway, and we will continue to push on it. We've had events where we've pulled together the lead officers from some of our main public sector partners who procure food, and we've talked about how we can get alignment and work through the One City approach to do that. But that's not always easy as well because they have their own financial pressures. But we're happy to keep talking to you. We'll keep pressing to make progress, but we can't turn the organisation around on sixpence.
Okay, I think we've got time for a question from Hayden Gill on Park Row Active Travel.
Thank you. This relates to a risk register that was wrongly published in February, the Cabinet meeting, and I wasn't able to question that, so I'm questioning it here. There's a risk that the Mayor has objected to parts of the Park Row permanent scheme, and this has delayed the scheme by at least 3 or 4 months, risking the funding and the delivery of the scheme. So question 1, if you could, Mayor.
The question's up there. So can you expand on your specific objections to the Park Row bus stop?
This is the floating bus stop with the cycle lane that runs in between the bus stop and the pavement.
Which is in line with national guidance, yeah.
But it's guidance. It's not directive, and it's national. It comes from Westminster Whitehall. In fact, Councillor Wilcox, who prefers to be known as, raised earlier on about the dangers of creating situations in which cyclists are more likely to come into conflict with pedestrians. And I think there's a lot more to be asked, particularly on that Park Row site when the pavement is so narrow and the road is so narrow, about creating a circumstance where pedestrians have to cross a cycle lane to get on the bus, particularly as I think about older residents and people with disabilities. So, you know, I think we have some real concerns about that. There may be other places in which, where we have a wider road with the opportunity to have very clear signage in which it would be, more appropriate. But at the moment, I think that would not necessarily be a good use of or a safe use of that piece of our pavement and highway.
Thank you. Question 2, why is the Mayor making design decisions on active travel schemes against consultation responses and experts?
Listen, I'm not going to step into the shoes of Gove and talk about despising the experts and all that. We want our experts, but experts offer us guidance. And there is a thing that we do draw on in the city called lived experience, and another thing that we call common sense. If we create a cycle lane on a narrow road that goes between the pavement and the bus stop, we're creating the conditions in which there's heightened likelihood of some kind of conflict. And look, with all the best will in the world, and we say, so I ride my bike every day. One of the best things I can do on my bike is ride as though I might need to stop. Right? Where there is a bus stop and a bus pulls over, I pull up behind it and I wait to go if it's not safe to go, around the bus. We do need to roll out infrastructure for cyclists, but that infrastructure can't be built on a commitment to making sure cyclists never have to use their brakes to allow someone else to use some of that public space. So look, we want the infrastructure to roll out. We'll take guidance, but we'll also use our lived experience of Bristol and common sense in making use on how we design our public highway.
Thank you. Okay. I think you've asked 2 questions, so... Okay, yes, you do have a supplementary.
So he talks about using brakes. Currently, there is a driver, I can guarantee it, parked in the Park Row bollard scheme. What do you say to that driver parked in that scheme at the moment, blocking people from safely travelling down Park Row?
Don't be selfish. And just like I would say to anyone in a vehicle, whether it be a car or a bike, behave as though there are other people trying to make use of the space that you are using. Right? And I say that whether it's cyclists using shared space with pedestrians, or whether it's cars using shared space on the roads with cyclists. There's so much we can do as an authority with rules and segregated spaces and all the rest of it. But some of the way the city functions is going to be down to human behaviour, decency, and a decision to be caring and compassionate or not. Parking in the cycle lane is that. But that rule goes for car drivers, it all goes for cyclists, and it also goes for people who ride their bikes 30-odd mile an hour down the railway path. We need to behave as though there are other people living in the city.
Thank you. I'm afraid that concludes the questions received from the members of the public that we have time to hear. I'd like to inform members of the public that the adjournment for today's meeting is expected to be at 7:45, and I invite you to remain if you would like to hear the other agenda items. If not, if you could leave as quietly as possible. Thank you. We do have now agenda item 7, which is petitions notified by councillors. There have been 2 councillor petitions received for this meeting, and councillors are invited to speak for 1 minute. I'm just going to keep on talking for a little bit so that I don't want Barry to have to talk over everybody leaving, because I'm going to invite Councillor Parsons to present his petition. Councillor Barry's petition is called Save Cafe 5 in Greenbank. And maybe we just wait a minute and then you can start speaking. Oh. Okay, I invite you to speak. Thank you.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Cafe 5 is a small community cafe in Greenbank with no indoor seating. Since May of 2020, thanks to new street hospitality licences, the cafe could make use of 2 outside tables that overlook the railway path, making it a little safer for everyone. This little area has become a lively and welcoming place where all ages and cultures meet. Elderly neighbours get together for coffee, kids and parents stop by for cake and a chat on their way back from school, local poets and musicians perform outside in sunny weather. With the withdrawal of COVID outdoor hospitality legislation, the cafe is threatened. As of this morning, over 1,100 people have signed the petition to save Cafe 5, showing how well loved this little community space is. Let's find a way to make sure that it can survive. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Parsons. You painted a very pretty picture there. Thank you. We have one other petition which Councillor Annie Stafford-Townsend is going to speak to, and that's Save Bristol Harbour Community.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Okay, I'm presenting the petition from the Harbour users community called Save Bristol Harbour Community, and it's asking for Bristol City Council to give them a democratic process. Currently, it's at 4,569 signatories. We'd hoped to have it debated, but unfortunately not all of those were Bristol signatories, so we couldn't have that. The changes to the fee structure and the charges were published in January, giving only 3 months' notice to Harbour users of the pending changes. Despite Cabinet papers of September 19 committing to a full consultation and improvements to facilities, and crucially committing to this before raising harbour fees, neither of those 2 first things have happened, but the last thing has. I welcome the Mayor's commitment earlier today to publishing the review that these changes have been based upon, but the petitioners asked for only one thing, and that is to pause the changes to the harbour fees until the equalities impact of these changes are able to be fully assessed, and to consult on those changes and give the harbour users enough time to prepare for them. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Townsend. Just for clarity, I will say that agenda item 8, which was a petition debate called Save Bristol Harbour Community, it has been withdrawn. The petition, as Councillor Townsend said, didn't meet the full criteria, so she has spoken to it instead. We move straight on then to agenda item 9, which is the Bristol City Youth Council update. This report is for noting. I would like to call on representatives of the Youth Council to present the report. Delighted to see you here again this year. You have 10 minutes, and I know that you usually organise these presentations very clearly and well, so I look forward to hearing from you. And I hand over to you.
Thank you. Hello, my name is Yolanda, and I am the new chair of the Bristol City Youth Council, and I'm here to update you on our campaigns. In the February half-term, we had a residential in the Forest of Dean and made our plans for what we will try and achieve over the next upcoming year. We were also fortunate enough to meet with a small group of young people from Northern Ireland as we strive to build partnerships with other youth councils. One of our first actions during the conference was to update our manifesto, make a timeline for goals we want to achieve this upcoming year, and re-elect our youth mayors, UK youth parliament members, and media reps. These roles hold separate priorities to the Bristol City Youth Council. However, the council supports these priorities. The Youth Council is confident that this updated manifesto better reflects our aims and provides challenging yet more achievable targets. This afternoon, you will hear from 4 representatives, our UK Youth Parliament members and youth mayors that will outline our plans for the next year as a youth council. We hope that you find this informative and that you support us in achieving the outcome of making Bristol a fair and inclusive city for all young people. I will now pass you over to our representatives from each of our campaigns, who will explain our manifesto in more detail.
Hello everyone, I am part of the Youth Safety Campaign. Our aim is to improve the well-being of young people in Bristol, ensuring that everyone feels as safe as possible at home, in school and in the community. Over the past year, we have worked to improve the safety of Bristol's young people, specifically focusing on knife crime and safety in schools. For example, we worked with the peer influencers in the council to create a workshop on knife crime that we will deliver to Year 6 students this summer, focusing on preventing and responding to violence. Furthermore, we developed a survey to send to a number of schools spread across Bristol, as well as young carers, to gain young people's views on how safe they feel in and outside of school. We will share our finding with the schools themselves and use our results to guide the work of our campaign group this year, as well as future Youth City Council campaigns. During the second half of our term, we will maintain our focus on knife crime, delivering our planned sessions to schools. We will also focus increasingly on the safety of young women, aiming to work with Bristol-based and national charities, such as Missing Link and Everyone's Invited, fundraising and supporting the work that they do around the safety of young women. We hope that, through our campaign group this year, we will continue to improve the security of all young people in Bristol, helping to create a safe and welcoming city for everyone who lives here. Thank you, and I'll now pass on to Willow.
Good evening, comrades and bourgeois parasites. I'm Willow from the... Yeah, it's accurate, I think. I'm Willow from the Your Health Matters campaign. And in the past year, our campaign has focused on inclusive sports, period poverty, and exam stress within schools. In September, some of our members visited a golf club to discuss accessibility for those with physical disabilities, and we helped promote a leaflet for inclusive sports in Bristol. We have had successful communication with schools across the city, inquiring about their provisions for period poverty and policies around exam stress. And we are now in the process of compiling the positive actions various schools claim that they are doing into a leaflet, which we are then hoping to then circulate to as many of these schools as possible in order to encourage better policies for young people in schools citywide. Our long-term goal is to produce a video with a specific focus on men's mental health, and we have planned to speak to someone from the mental health charity Off the Record regarding this soon. This year, also, a subcommittee of our campaign has been formed specifically focusing on neurodivergence. This subcommittee hopes to gather information on the conditions of neurodiverse students in Bristol schools through a survey and use this information to improve neurodivergent inclusion and awareness in schools. We hope that you take genuine positive action from what we have said and not just shallow words, which I'm sure you'll grace us with in a minute. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Samia and I represent Inclusive Bristol. Inclusive Bristol is a campaign group that promotes equality, diversity and inclusion. One of our main projects is to hold a Family Fun Day fundraiser in partnership with SARI. SARI stands for Stand Against Racism and Inequality. The reason why we partnered up with them is because their values align with the principles that our campaign group stands for and because our beliefs are closely connected. We want to hold this fundraiser because we'd like to accumulate some money in order to fund some of SARI's projects. Additionally, we have plans for producing a video entailing what our group is about and how we aim to provide a better society through our planned campaigns. We shall share these videos to as many schools as possible and additionally take advantage of that moment to promote our fundraiser to a mass audience. Overall, our campaign group strives to provide a better learning and developing environment for all young people without the fear of being discriminated, as well as ensuring that factors such as microaggressions and devaluing of culture is decreased and potentially eliminated from such conditions. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Theo and I'm from the UKYP, the United Kingdom Youth Parliament. And on the 4th of March, me and Luisha went to YouthCon, which is an annual event designed to help us work on our campaign goals, which is for all political parties to include free school meals in their election manifesto. To do this, we plan to create a youth-led free school meals bill, and our campaign goal was decided from 434,000 young people across the country. So there's a vote which decided that health and well-being was the most important topic among young people. And then to fully understand what this meant, some focus groups were created, totaling 2,800 participants, who clarified the major topics under this banner. These topics were narrowed down to 5, then to 1 by the Youth Parliament, and the Social Action Group elected to create a campaign for the topic.
Then we worked through some simulations set in the fictional town of Forgeford to better develop an understanding of tactics and techniques which could be used to further our campaign goal. We worked together to create a letter to be sent to the local MPs, persuading them to meet in person to discuss the possibility of adding our free school meals bill to the election manifesto, as well as creating a variety of possible answers to any queries they may have, and several ideas of possible implementations of the free school meals bill in case they were concerned by the practicality of it all.
Several councillors also came to answer any questions we had about surrounding the world of politics, and we learnt things that we could do to help further our campaign aims, such as involving MPs by inviting them to the school as part of a big lunch.
Overall, it was thoroughly enjoyable and interesting experience in which we learned a lot about how to interact with our local councils and engage them on their policy making. And we look forward to working with the council in the future.
Good afternoon. My name's Felix Massey. I'm one of the youth mayors for the upcoming year, serving alongside Maya Parker until January next year. We'll also be supported by Annika and Jeremiah, who some of you may know, who have for the past year been excellent youth mayors, working with organisations like the Mayor's Office. With the Mayor's Office, the University of Bristol, and Creative Youth Network to both support the Mayor and to raise young people's voice. They've been truly great, and they'll continue to support and deputise for us, particularly with their work on knife crime and young people's safety. In addition to this vital issue, some other campaign areas we would like to address whilst in office include the housing crisis as it affects younger generations, which I know the Mayor and the One City office are already tackling, as well as the council-owned housing company. In addition to this, political and financial education for secondary schools is something I've wanted to pursue for a while. Unfortunately not yet, as well as SEND provision in schools, which is something I feel very close to as someone with an education healthcare plan. I appreciate that this is something which the council has ensured funding for so far, but unfortunately it's still at a level where parents and families are waiting years for reviews for their children. We both look forward to working with the Mayor on these important issues and campaigning to improve the city for all young people. Thank you.
Good evening. Along with these issues, Felix and I are also passionate about environmental protection and would love to have a positive impact on the city's efforts towards creating a healthier and more hopeful future for its young people. Something we also share an interest in is the right to roam. Especially as this is such a relevant topic, we see it as crucial that young people are not excluded from open spaces now, after so much time confined to our homes more than ever. We are also interested in mental health provisions, particularly early intervention being more widely available. Young people should not have to feel as though we are only deserving of support upon reaching crisis points. Thank you for this time, and we hope you share our interest in helping Bristol grow into a place which is even better at supporting young people and our future.
Good evening, everyone. My name's Poppy, and I'm here to talk to you about the Youth Council's new area forums. As a young person living in South Bristol, I've always felt disconnected from community decision-making, and it has grown apparent to me that young people rarely get a chance to input in these decisions. This is why the Youth Council are working with the Youth and Community Work Team in partnership to run area forums to bring together young people from different youth groups and organisations across their Bristol area, and we really want them to have a real say in what young people need and where Bristol is struggling to support them. At the moment, we have 3 different area forums. There is South, North and East Central Forum. Members of Youth Council attend these meetings to really listen and understand young people's needs from all of Bristol, allowing us to see where we can further our own campaigns and support certain areas. Our overall aim is to give the young people from area forums a chance to have their input and experience listened to in the new funding distribution for youth services. Many of you will already be aware of the substantial budget cuts that the council is currently facing, and so you'll also recognise why it's so important that we listen to the voices of young people now to ensure a positive future for youth services. We would really appreciate your support in progressing the area forums because their impact helps us to represent every youth voice in Bristol and make it into a city that supports its youth so we can move forward as a united Bristol. Thank you.
It has been a great honour for us to participate in this full council meeting. I am a proud member of the Bristol City Youth Council, and I hope that you can see that my fellow youth councillors are passionate to make change as well. We're very much looking forward to working with you over the rest of our term in office. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that detailed, cogent and very well presented report to us. We very much enjoyed it, and I have to say I was reminded of one half of a very famous quote by your third speaker, who said that if you're not a communist by the time you're 18, you have no heart. And I'm not going to bother with the other half of the quote. If I could now call on Councillor Tom Hathaway to speak on behalf of the Green Group in response. Thank you.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. And can I start by stating my allegiance to the comrade camp over the bourgeois parasite camp? I'd like to commend this report to the Chamber and start by thanking you and also the rest of the 35 members of the Bristol Youth Council for showcasing your fantastic work. The manifesto they've developed for their 2-year term shows no shortage of ambition and serves as a reminder of some of the challenges the youth of Bristol face today and how they're intertwined with the work we do through the council. You've heard that Inclusive Bristol recognises the diversity gap in our institutions. Your Health Matters addresses mental health and access to sport for young people with disabilities. Youth Safety Support identifies safety of women and preventing knife crime as key priorities, and we'll hear more about the latter in the debate on the Green motion later this evening. I was pleased to join Green, Labour and Lib Dem colleagues taking part in the South West YouthCon event the weekend just before last. There were representatives from Bristol's Youth Council at the event, and sitting round the table with some of them, I was really impressed by the depth of knowledge and understanding about some of the issues facing broader society. We spoke about the importance of consistent government funding beyond just infrastructure, an issue we're all too familiar with. A shiny new youth centre is all well and good, but it's nothing without the support workers there to run events, do the outreach, and engage at the human level. That is where the impact lies. But the fragility of the system was brought home when an entrepreneurial lad who, as well as sitting several A-levels and being a youth council rep, made his own music and his own jewellery, told me about his mum who had to leave her job as a youth worker because it didn't feed her kids. Embedding youth voices as we shape our decision-making structures will be vital. Bristol is bucking the trend and getting younger, and it's inspiring to see the next generation politically engaged through these institutions as much as through the protest movements and activism that characterise our city. I look forward to seeing the ambitious actions and objectives in this report realised over the next year, and encourage everyone to reach out to the Youth Council members in their ward and forge new partnerships. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. I'd now like to call on Councillor Paul Coggan to speak on behalf of the Labour Group.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. And thank you all for coming in. It's just giving up your free time, helping old fogies like us, and you know, giving your opinion, your lived experience of being young in Bristol is invaluable to us. So I'd just like to thank the Youth Council, the Youth Mayors and members of the Youth Parliament. It takes a lot of courage to run for office, especially at such a young age when you also got the stress of your exams and such. Thank you for your manifesto. Reading it, I thought it shows how in touch young people are with the challenges facing Bristol. Some of the things in your manifesto that you've spoken about here as well. Working towards a more inclusive Bristol, specifically equal opportunity for people from minority communities. I'm glad to hear that you're working with Sari as well. That's always a good thing. You're campaigning for free school meals. Talking about the housing crisis and how that affects young people. I mean, that's looking at the prices of houses and rent, and you know, you'll be entering the market in that yourself soon. So thank you for your input on that. your work on better mental health support for young people and accessible sport for disabled young people, the neurodivergence awareness, specifically men's mental health as well, and then the preventative support for those at risk of becoming involved in knife crime, safety in schools and for young women to feel safe. These are all welcome campaigns that I'm sure every councillor in this room will agree are important, and we will be happy to take it forward with you. These are all the topics that we have discussed in the council at some point, so it shows how in tune young people are with the needs of our city as a whole, and not just young people. It highlights the importance of co-production with young people. They clearly have got good ideas, they clearly care and are passionate about our city and its young people, and they clearly want to make positive change. It's why I am pleased to read that the Youth Council members now sit on the One City Transport Board and the Children and Young People's Board. Councillors here know the importance of co-production, although it usually refers to in the context of SEND or adult social care, but the same of course applies to young people too. By having young people on these boards, we can get your direct input into policies that affect you, hopefully leading to better outcomes. And on the Transport Board, I hope we can work together in our efforts to get WECA to provide free bus travel to young people. So thank you to you all for the work that you all do this year, and know that the Labour Group's door is always open if you need anything. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I now call on Councillor Henry Michelat to speak on behalf of the Conservative Group?
Thank you, my Lord Mayor. I'm very happy to respond to this presentation. As one of the youngest councillors in this chamber, I find myself in the happy position of being little nearer to the age range as some of these young people present in this report. In preparation for our meeting today, I have read with great interest their manifesto and the outlined campaigns it contains. I also appreciate these local themes supplement national initiatives around huge challenges such as climate change, mental health and ending poverty. Of course, one can and often will disagree over how many of these issues are defined and the best course of action to achieve some stated aims. But just because we may disagree on the approach or strategy, that does not mean differing political parties don't share a broad vision or overall goal. It is on the road taken and means of achieving these ends that we may depart. My Lord Mayor, as ever, the representatives of the Youth Council and Youth Mayors are tremendously impressive in making their point and in public speaking. I'm sure you're all building a reservoir of skills which will serve you well in your respective academic and professional careers. I also welcome the work they're undertaking around promoting inclusivity, better mental health and improving youth services. As a footnote, I think it would be helpful if statistical data and evidence could be compiled to show the material difference each of these campaigns has or is making in the year ahead. Concerning youth violence, I hope some of the young contributors will take the opportunity to watch the debate, perhaps on replay later, on tackling knife crime and the golden motion. My Lord Mayor, if Bristol or indeed society is to really get to grips on what seems to be an escalating problem, then we need the input of those who are often the very victims of this form of crime. I hope the work being done in schools around this subject will find some practical solutions and ways to dissuade, deter and disarm people from carrying these weapons. Sadly, in all too many cases, arming oneself in this way only provides or proves to be an entirely misconceived or false sense of security. Thank you for giving us this summary of important youth activities and interventions. Thank you, my Lord Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. I'd now like to call on Councillor Sarah Classic to speak on behalf of the Liberal Democrat Group.
Thank you, and thank you to all members of the Youth Council for being here today. As somebody who didn't get involved in politics until adulthood, I have to say I'm always completely in awe of hearing from young people who have got in far earlier than I ever did. And some of the conversations that you're having that are in this manifesto are worlds away from the conversations that we were having when I was your age. Things about neurodivergence, mental health, diversity, all these conversations have improved so much in even such a short space of time. And it really is inspiring to hear that. Hearing you guys talk about things like improving diversity, improving acceptance of LGBTQ plus members of the society, it's really great. And I think some adults here and who have passed through this chamber could learn a lot from you guys, definitely. Some of your manifesto, things like improving outcomes for children in care, for example, really inspiring, and something that we talked about in corporate parenting panel is how we can engage you guys more and bring those outcomes to that committee. So that's really, I really hope that at some point we can work together more on that. Your targets on knife crime and that part of your manifesto, I really, as others have said, hope that you do stay and listen to the debate because it is such an important issue facing young people. And we hope that whatever happens in this chamber later, we can work with you guys and with you on improving those outcomes. And hopefully that opens the door to even more working with the council, with the Youth Council, and more of us being really engaged with you guys. So thank you so much. Thank you for your inspiration. And if the future is you guys, then I'm really excited for it.
Thank you. Can I call now on Councillor Gary Hopkins to speak on behalf of the Knoll Community Party?
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'll keep this brief. Firstly, the quality of the presentation is somewhat higher than quite a number of the reports that we get fed in this council. It's clear, it's coherent, and it makes sense. You wouldn't expect somebody as ancient as myself to absolutely agree with every detail, but I think that it does actually make a huge amount of sense. I also am concerned that the opportunity for engagement has been reduced in this city. I will remember with neighbourhood partnerships, local youth groups were actually absolutely involved with the mainstream of what was actually being delivered and had their say and had an influence. That has actually been lost now, and it's not quite so easy. The other thing that concerns me is in terms of outreach youth work and the fact that in this city now, that has actually been so dramatically reduced. The great facility that's going in at Inns Court will be good, it will be useful, but when we speak to our youth services, they don't have the capability now to do outreach work. And basically sometimes a small amount of initial activity can make the difference to somebody's life all the way ahead. So thank you for the work that you're actually doing. Thank you for making sense. I'll look forward to seeing you again next year.
Thank you, Gary. I'd finally like to ask Mayor Rees if he has a few words to say.
Sure, yeah, thank you. And as you know, as a number of people that picked up, thank you for the seriousness of the issues you've raised. And I met with the youth mayors, or the incoming youth mayors, just last week, and we ran through a few of the priorities that you set out. So I won't, we know the challenges facing young people are huge, and those challenges are not isolated to young people. They're also they also encompass the families, the families and communities within which young people are having to grow nowadays as well. So it's a whole city approach that many of you are asking us to take. But let me put a few things on the table that maybe we could explore about how we build your voice and your manifesto commitments into what's coming up in the city. So I think a number of you have started to grapple with the One City Plan, which has been an effort for us to get the whole collection of organisations that shape life in a city across health, criminal justice, business, voluntary community sector, to identify a shared number of priorities to which they can all point. We refresh that plan every 2 years. This is the year in which it's being refreshed. So one of the things that we could do with you is to spend a few hours with some of the young people looking at all those timelines that are put together by each of the boards under the One City Plan, and make sure that the actual words you use are actually represented in the One City Plan, the city priorities, not just for the next year, but for over the next 5, 10, 15 years also. I think what I would also offer, if I can offer cabinet time, if you'd like well, when we talked about it back there about housing, if you'd like a specific conversation with a cabinet member and a group of young people about a particular area, please just reach out and we can make that time happen so that you actually have the policy conversation and you get to talk through all the ups and downs of the challenges and opportunities we face. And I think that would be really rich, because one of the things that we grapple with in Bristol is that no solution comes without a price, and there are often unintended consequences to good interventions. And I think it could be really useful to talk through some of those things with you. We just had a conversation around housing density and height and brownfield site development, so we can do more of that. I think what I would say about picking up on Councillor Hopkins' point, I would encourage all councillors to convene young people within their own wards as well. There's nothing stopping anyone doing that bit of community organising, to have a meeting every 3 or 4 months with young people in the ward to hear and make sure those voices are represented in here. That does not take a big council machinery, but maybe there could be some support from our own council youth services and community development officers. That doesn't mean they'll do it for anyone. It just means a bit of support. And what I would offer is, on myself, I meet with the youth mayors. I think it's once a month we meet to talk through issues. We could expand that out, so we could have the regular meeting with the youth mayors once a month. But what we could do is every, say, 3 months, expand that out to a larger group. We can meet in the chamber and make sure that I'm being directly informed by your priorities, and you can hear what's going on for us. I'd also say, just about engagement, one of the things that we have done over the last few years is really encourage schools to make use of this chamber. My nephew was in here with his primary school, St. Werburgh's, just a couple of weeks ago. Encourage your schools to come in here, make use of the chamber for debates. Cabinet member, councillors can pop in and be part of those debates as well. But make sure you take ownership of this building. It's your building. Thank you.
Thank you. This report is for noting, and this concludes this agenda item. And I would just like to say a final huge thank you to all year round, and for coming here today to tell us all about it. So thank you. You're welcome to stay for the rest of the meeting. We move on now to agenda item 10, which is the Committee Model Working Group recommendations, which have been brought here today to full council. First of all, I'd like to call on Councillor Jenny Bartle to move the report. Jenny, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you. So I'm really pleased we could bring this report. I'm not giving the officers enough to do on this working group, so it's really good that we can, show that they're pulling their weight. But yeah, no, it's really important that we want to bring the whole chamber with us through this discussion, even though at the moment we're on a fairly preliminary stage. We wanted to make sure that we didn't end up bringing a full constitution that people had a whole load of problems with. So we're forming a sketch, getting things on the page for officers to develop. And I personally think it's important for us not to see these as set in stone yet, but they are recommendations for officers to develop, and we'll keep coming back. And I do think that it's important that we talk about, the challenges you have for these recommendations, so that we can iterate on those things and make sure that as we approach the details, that we can get the best thing possible. So voting on these recommendations is an indication that we're happy with the overall direction of the design, and I'm really looking forward to hearing the challenges from all parties. So on the specific recommendations, the first meeting was fairly straightforward, I think. So those recommendations bring through a lot of the working practices that will help us function, things like forward plans, key decision thresholds, and having emergency decision-making procedures. Our second meeting was about, public meeting that is, was about scrutiny, and came up with a rather interesting kind of idea. So we were minded as the committee that scrutiny that, one of the things that scrutiny really offers is policy development at the moment, but we think that that's going to be mostly taken care of by the policy committees. So we wanted to have a way for opposition parties to challenge decisions that are made by any group that might have a majority on the committees. However, with scrutiny committees, they're committees too, so they'd also be proportional, and so if there's a majority, then the scrutiny would be done by the majority party. So we've come up with this idea of an escalation panel, which would hopefully be able to challenge and overturn decisions. So that's an interesting idea, and I want to hear some opinions on that from other parties if they're available. And just to finish, I wanted to bring up the community engagement strategy, which we took a report on at last meeting. So far, we've only had 4 focus group sessions and a bit of engagement with some of the mayoral commissions. But we're planning to see more community and stakeholder engagement in coming months. But what that initial report that we've seen showed is that the public want better equality of access to decisions.
Can I ask you to begin wrapping up, please?
Sorry. More transparency and to feel included. So I hope that we can keep that at the front of our minds and make sure our government is designed as inclusively and fairly as possible. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd now like to call on Councillor Jeff Gollop to second the report.
Thank you, my Lord Mayor. I wanted to start by just giving a little background to remind members how we got to where we are, and that this isn't just a random decision that the committee made after a few minutes and a cup of coffee. We actually had 6 months of listening to experts and external advisors and people who'd been through the change to the committee system, talking to us about the good things and the pitfalls. So we had all that background. Now we're putting forward outlined plans. Now it's very dangerous for a vice chairman to say something slightly different to what the chairman has just said, but can I just put a slightly different emphasis? Actually, what we're proposing tonight is going to be written in stone once the chamber's voted for it. But what we're discussing tonight is the skeleton. What we then have to come back with recommendations that actually put the frame on that skeleton and give it complete shape. But what we can't do is keep changing our minds over the course of the next 6 months, because we have to know the decisions that we've taken to build and go forward. Now, Section 6 covers the role of leader and deputy and the policy committees. If we have approval for that, we can then come back and recommend what specific areas those committees will cover. Section 7 is talking about escalation. Now that escalation is actually really important because it's different to calling, but it will have to be controlled. And once we know that members approve the idea of escalation, again, we can put meat on that frame and give it rules that will work. I know the proposals about scrutiny are potentially contentious. I understand that. And I think it's important, thank you, that again, we recognise we had a very lengthy debate on this and we identified some key points. A cross-party committee would not endorse a policy or decision without asking questions and challenging it. Certainly not if I'm on it, I can tell you that now. So scrutiny would actually happen at the decision-making committee. It just wouldn't be called scrutiny. But in addition, my Lord Mayor, the resources for staff support and demand on councillor time would make this unworkable, given that councillors who've made a decision, which they would be by being on the committee, can't then scrutinise it and will be ruled out from doing so. It would be impossible. So we're in danger of creating an unwieldy system. But my Lord Mayor, if I can just say, in the end, the committee voted not closely as I thought it might. It voted by 10 votes in favour and 1 abstention to approve the recommendation we bring tonight. So to each of you here, every member of your party who was on that committee did not oppose the proposals on scrutiny. So when you vote tonight, just think about that and think about whether you are supporting your members who made a decision of how to vote in that committee.
Thank you, Councillor Gollop.
Lord Mayor, we researched it, we reviewed it, and we voted on it. So please endorse our report by voting for it. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
I'd now like to call on Councillor Guy Poultney to speak on behalf of the Green Group.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. So the Green Group welcomes this report and welcomes that progress is being made. We do have to acknowledge this report constitutes the first few pieces of a puzzle. What's here may be fine. What's here has been discussed over the last 6 months, but it also may not be. We won't know if it works. We won't know how good it is until we see that complete picture. As with all votes for the Green Party, this one's unwhipped. Most of us are voting for it, I believe, to acknowledge the direction of travel, to acknowledge that progress has been made, and that's a positive thing. Some, I believe, are voting against to express their concerns about the contents of the report, and I would be lying if I said I didn't share some of their concerns. The report, as Councillor Gollop says quite rightly, acknowledges that duplicating the committees as scrutiny committees would be a massive waste of time and resources. That's self-evident. Equally, the escalation panel has a huge potential to be a very valuable tool for, in effect, to kind of recreate a new mode of scrutiny that could be very effective. We wait and see. But how will these things work together? We simply don't know. And we simply won't know until there is, as others have said earlier, until there is more meat on the bones, until we know what the whole picture looks like. Including things like, how will power be delegated? Will it go to a leader and a deputy leader? Will it go to these committees? Will it go to communities? Will it go to councillors themselves? All this is yet to be seen, but what we do know is that positive progress is being made. These meetings are now being held publicly, which is fantastic, and it has been a really positive move to see the public in there engaging directly with the policy-making process. And finally, I think having the public in has really kind of renewed a little, reinvigorated the committee a little. With this whole process, there's the opportunity to really bear out the promises that were made during the referendum campaign. I don't know how many members of this chamber went out on the doorsteps during the mayoral referendum to ask to campaign in one direction or another. But what I found was an awful lot of people who wanted to see an end to the kind of top-down organisation of the council, who wanted to see a council more embedded in communities rather than being an institution embedded in this grand building on College Green. So to finish up, we have the chance to move towards a council that's not there to lead. And not a single person raised with me the importance of leadership during that campaign. What I did hear an awful lot of was people saying we need a council that listens more. And I think that's a very clear steer to this committee. So I look forward to seeing more meat on the bones and more pieces of the jigsaw being put in front of us, and for a time when our support can be a little bit less qualified. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like now to call on Councillor Nicola Beach to speak on behalf of the Labour Group.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Yeah, very good to stand up tonight and talk about the work that the committee has been doing over the last 12 months. Jenny, hats off to you for a marvellous effort. What a shift to pull as your first chairing role. One of the benefits of being from a group that does debate issues and votes on it is collective responsibility and serious leadership. So I'm proud to stand up today and say that as a group we support this paper wholeheartedly, Jenny, and it's a shame the rest of your group can't see sense as well. Jeff likes to talk about skeletons, I like to build houses, and so for me this is all about the foundations of a future governance system. It is true that until we have everything, I guess we don't have anything. But at the same time, we have to start to lead, and we have to start to stick these things down in order to steer officers, steer ourselves, heaven forbid, steer our future candidates, so they start to understand a world they might politically step into. We have a responsibility to the city to do that. So tonight, I'm very pleased to stand up on behalf of the Labour Group, support this paper. Hats off, Jenny, hats off, Jeff. Keep going. Let's keep going. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. I'd like now to call on Councillor Richard Eddy to speak on behalf of the Conservative Group.
Lord Mayor, I'm one of the two Tory councillors who serve on what's called the Committees Committee, or more formally, the actual Committee Model Working Group. I think it's a universal truth shared cross-party amongst all members that the necessary foundational work last year was somewhat cumbersome and relatively slow. The tempo of our work programme has certainly sped up since January, and that's welcome. And I also welcome the fact we now have monthly public meetings, so we have an opportunity to hear, like Guy Portney said, the voice of Bristolians. I would also like to place on record my thanks to Councillor Holland, who chaired the original group, and now Councillor Bartle. I would also wish to pay tribute to our long-suffering officers supporting the working group, Tim O'Gara, Lucy Fleming and Taylor Mayhew. Members will note our recent decision to bring reports to full council, not just for information, but to sign off. We don't want to get to November and, having done a huge body of work, find the entire recommendations are thrown out by full council. I endorse, and my group endorse, all the recommendations before us. In my opinion, the most important of the recommendations to undertake scrutiny in policy committees with a separate scrutiny function retained for health, community safety and flood risk management, and the escalation panel to consider matters of concern, including referral to full council. As one of only 2 councillors who have experienced all 3 government systems, including the committee system, I think it's important we recognise that the breach between or distinction between the executive and scrutiny is just a result of the 2000 Local Government Act. We've moved beyond that, and a separate scrutiny function now is both unnecessary and needlessly bureaucratic. The Tory group will be supporting this.
Thank you, Councillor. Now I'd like to call on Councillor Andrew Brown to speak on behalf of the Liberal Democrat group.
Thank you, my Lord Mayor. I was slightly confused at the suggestion that this is about direction of travel and an iteration when we're being asked to approve the matter set out. So thanks to Councillor Gollett for clarifying that in his opening remarks. Also, following the last item, consideration should be given to including the Youth Council in further consultation as you go forward. Anyway, I'm really pleased to see that this report, although I note that appendices referred to in the report in the papers weren't actually included in the full council bundle. And that's a shame because I think they added some important context. Having subbed in on a couple of meetings shortly after the group was first established, and then again towards the end of last year, it's good to see some firm progress now being made. And I appreciate some of the stuff that you were doing last year was foundational, but it's good to see progress out, obvious progress now coming forward. I look forward to the further reports over coming months and to having the new system ironed out by the end of the year. My group welcomes the proposals in the report, although we want to make the following observations. In section 6.5, provision is made for other details about the process relating to decisions made below the £500,000 threshold, and that those will be confirmed later. We believe that there should be a mechanism to refer decisions below this threshold, which would currently be taken to Cabinet member briefings, to full committee in particular circumstances. So we hope to see some measures on that included in subsequent reports. We also welcome the inclusion in section 7.1 of a mechanism for referral of policies and decisions for further scrutiny by the escalation panel. And we believe that's a pragmatic approach which will allow for members to perform the statutory scrutiny within the committee framework, but also providing a forum to call in any contentious decisions or things that are felt to be out with the Constitution. Looking at the work programme, I'd like to flag up 2 things. First, there's no specific mention of audit, and as Chair of Audit, I do trust that the committee will be considering that fully as part of their deliberations. And the other is that in the session in May, which will look at local decision making. I'm really keen that we find ways to make decisions as close to our communities as we can. Having looked at some of the consultation responses, I believe that's something that the citizens want as well, the citizens of the city. Finally, I'm going to conclude with an anecdote. A senior officer recently asked me what I fancied doing within the new committee system. And to be honest, I had not thought that far ahead. I hadn't thought that much about it, and I think that's remiss of me. Notwithstanding there's a year to go, and the small matter of another round of local elections, I do think that those of us who hope to be here again should think about what skills, knowledge and experience we have and how we can use those in the new system, put them to use. And also, this isn't just a political change, it impacts the whole organisation. So I also challenge officers to think about how their personal and corporate processes and practices will have to change and how changes are communicated with staff throughout the organisation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Now I'd like to come to Councillor Gary Hopkins.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. With regard to the pace and the quality of the work, I'm actually rather more with Councillor Eddy than Councillor Gollop, in that initially, when we were listening to people from different areas, different circumstances to us, I don't think that we actually learned a huge amount. What we did learn a lot from, in my opinion, was the excellent last public meeting that we actually had. And I hope that if in the future we get debate and challenge, that the quality that we actually had there from the committee, the council will be in much better shape. I believe also that the concept of the committees actually effectively doing their own scrutiny in the main is right, but no institution is perfect. Everyone and everything makes mistakes. So basically having the fallback, which I think will be used very rarely, of the challenge, I think is important as well. The local context is vitally important. Everyone on the committee has expressed a desire to make certain that we get better public engagement, and the public in Bristol absolutely do want that. I cannot see how we can actually achieve that without having some degree of local decision making over things that matter to people, because for most people it's what happens in their street, in their area, that they care about, not what happens across the other side of the city. Although what happens across the other side of the city is vitally important. As a full council, obviously we'll deal with all of that. But to get the public engagement, to get the public to make an effort to get involved, we need to have local decision making. And I think also that the committee structure will give us the opportunity to iron out some other anomalies elsewhere in terms of party representation, etc., which will be covered in the next report, which we're not going to be debating. So thank you. We'll support this, and I think that we made tremendous progress at our last public meeting.
Thank you, Councillor Hopkins. So finally now, I would like to ask the Mayor if he would like to respond. No? Okay, so sorry, my mistake. Councillor Bartle, you do also have the right to sum up.
Yeah, I'll just sum up quickly. Yeah, I think the original point I was making, that maybe I ad-libbed a bit too much, is that the recommendations we make do all interdepend on each other. So this is what we want to get in, and this is what we want officers to write up. This is where we're steering now. But I do want to say that, like, it was one of the most important things that we learned, I think, from Sheffield, was this idea of when you make a decision over here, it has all these things over here. And so I think we will see potentially some kind of joining dots backwards, and not like, you know, completely turning over decisions that we've made, but we'll have a lot of interplay. Yeah, and just quick points on local decision making. Yeah, that is, I think, a really high priority that we'll need to get going on. Corporate involvement, you mentioned, we are starting to talk to Stephen Peacock. He'll be involved in this process a little bit more. And I think that's all I wanted to say. But yeah, thanks for everyone's support. Cheers.
Okay, so thank you. The recommendation is shown on the screen, and we're going to go for an aye-nay vote to see if we get a uniformity on that. If not, then we'll go to a named vote. So in the first instance, can I ask all those in favour of accepting this report say aye?
Aye.
All against say nay? All abstaining say abstain. Okay, so there is a clear majority and it has been that the report has been accepted. Don't quite know what was going on down there, but we still say the report has been accepted. Yes. Unanimously accepted. Thank you very much.
Lord Mayor, can I just ask, so in doing that, have we confirmed that everyone actually voted? I think it is quite important for future full council meetings, just because obviously in this model there is no record. This is quite a serious issue.
Well, I'm perhaps maybe we do need a further explanation. A decision was discussed at the agenda setting briefing. The electronic voting system is not working, so we would have to go to a named vote. So the way we've adopted, the approach we've adopted is that we will go for an aye-nay vote with abstain in it. If it's clear, as in this case it appeared to be unanimous, we would accept that. If not, we would go to a named vote. However, if you want to challenge this, we will go to a named vote.
No, Lord Mayor, I just want to make sure everyone actually voted. So I don't know if there's a mechanism in, if this is going to be the case for the whole of tonight's meeting, that everyone actually did vote.
Well, should we do it as a show of hands?
Everyone voted.
We did
no,
abstain
I understand,
as well.
so no one abstains.
We did.
Yeah, that's fine, but as long as everyone picked one of those three options.
Would you like a show of hands?
You're the Lord Mayor, Lord Mayor. I don't know what the best process is.
I don't think it's necessary. I think it was unanimous. It was declared unanimous. And in the lack of any evidence to the contrary, I'm going to accept that as a unanimous vote. Thank you. Now that you all know that the electronic voting system isn't working, I'm sure that hasn't influenced your attitudes at all. We now go on to the second, to agenda item 11, which is political proportionality update. As Lord Mayor, I'd like to move this report and the recommendations therein. I'd like to ask the Deputy Lord Mayor, Councillor Steve Smith, to second the report.
Second, dear my Lord Mayor.
Okay. The recommendation is now shown on the screen. This is going to be an aye-nay vote again, so all in favour say aye. Aye. All opposed say nay. Anybody who abstains say abstain. That's unanimously approved. Thank you. That concludes agenda item 11. We now move on swiftly to agenda item 12, which is the pay policy statement for 2023-2024. I'd like to call on Councillor Lorraine Francis to move the report. You have 3 minutes, Lorraine.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I won't be taking 3 minutes. Can you hear me okay? Okay. Thanks. So, obviously the pay policy and decision makings around that is published, so I'm not going to go through the pay policy in total. So my main comment is is to say this. I stand to confirm the pay policy. The pay policy for the wages of chief executives is determined by the Joint Negotiation Committee for Chief Executives of Local Authorities and the Joint Negotiating Committee for the Chief Officers of Local Authorities. So it's important to reiterate this. Whilst any changes to the pay of the chief executives can be determined by the Human Resource Committee, this relates to us having the ability to discuss and decide if we accept the pay range. This does not mean that HR Committee has the power to award the chief execs a pay increase or decrease, as this is managed through the Committee for Chief Executives, as previously mentioned, and in line with their pay scales. When we met as a committee for an extraordinary meeting on the 1st of March 2023, members were curious and questioned whether the rate of pay for public sector managers was too high and whether the council's use of agencies or interim staff was in keeping with public sector values. Today, this is not for debate, but will be an ongoing focus of discussion in future HR committee meetings. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Francis. I'd now like to call on Councillor Kerry Bales to second the report.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I second the HR pay policy. I am pleased to speak in support of this year's pay policy report. The key point for me is that the council's lowest paid workers earn at least the real living wage. Times are tough at the moment, but I am glad the council is playing its part in helping. Before I had my son, I worked as a cleaner part-time for the council, so I know firsthand how important it is to make sure our lower paid staff get a fair wage. Bristol City Council won the Public Sector Award for Living Wage Foundation. I am sure this will be welcomed across the chamber. We beat lots of other public sector organisations. What might help if I put my glasses on? To get that, public sector organisations to get that, and it would have taken a lot of hard work to get there. We only became a living wage accredited in 2018. It shows how far we have come in such a short time. There is, of course, still work to do. The council's highest paid employees earn 8.9 times more than the lowest paid employee, which is within our pay policy of 10-to-1 ratios. However, as I mentioned at the committee, some of the lowest and highest paid staff are employed through agencies. We should look to get the agency staff on the same pay structures as council staff. It's more difficult to do than for council staff. It's definitely something we can work towards. While we are talking about pay, I would like to mention the council is committed to applying national pay awards and the government committed to funding it. I know that unions are currently campaigning for inflation plus 2%. Most public sector's workers have had to put up with for years of pay restraint. In real terms, their pay is down by 25% since 2008. And when you consider how high inflation is at the moment, a pay rise of inflation plus 2% will only mean they are slightly better off than they were before Liz Truss crashed the economy. We need a proper pay rise for the council staff, and we need government to step up and fund it. I hope that councillors will join the Labour group and the unions in campaigning for a real fully funded pay rise for our council and school staff, and campaign for the government to fully fund it. But as for the pay policy statement, pay within the councils is very positive. We've still got a lot of work to do with agency workers, but Labour group will be voting for this.
Thank you. I'd now like to call on Councillor Emma Edwards to speak on behalf of the Green Group.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I trust the recommendations of the HR Group and I'll reserve my remarks. And it's nearly dinner time.
So I will move swiftly on then to Councillor Richard Eddy to speak on behalf of the Conservative Group in full faith that he will not reserve his remarks.
You're absolutely right, Lord Mayor. Well done. Those of us who were elected before 2021 will recall fondly former Labour councillor for Hartcliffe, Mark Brain. For many years, Mark was the chairman of the Audit Committee, and he made sure there was a forensic and very careful consideration of financial probity in this authority every year in presenting his Audit Committee report to Council. Mark will often say he hardly had to rehash his speech from one year to the next. Today, in addressing the pay policy, I feel somewhat akin to Mark Brain's sentiments. For the past 6 years, the Tory group has opposed the annual pay policy and will do so again today. I suppose I could sit down with that. But that would be to deny this chamber, and more importantly Bristolians, a few choice words. Members will know I am a slave to duty. 99% of the content of this pay policy is factual and uncontentious. We oppose this pay policy for one simple reason alone. It proclaims, indeed it boasts, that the best paid staff earn no more than 10 times the pay of the least paid employees. I have previously denounced this claim as bogus and a sham. If I was to use less parliamentary language, though we're not in Westminster, of course, I would even perhaps say it was a lie. The fact remains that this woefully selective ratio is based on only the council's permanent contracted employees. It carefully excludes those interims, consultants and agency staff who have been paid a daily rate equal to over £100,000 more than the chief execs. Yes, national guidance says we should include all permanent staff. It does not say, however, that we shouldn't include the real figure. Uncomfortably as it may be for the Mayor, the real ratio will show that Bristol massively fails to meet the much vaunted 10 times 1 pay ratio. Finally, could I add one remark? If Cabinet last spring had chosen not to transfer 200 cleaners and other low-paid staff to Bristol Waste, the 10 times to 1 pay ratio would be even worse. And Lord Mayor, some wonder why Bristolians out there don't believe they are fed all by the council. Can you blame them? Tory councillors will be voting against. Since you have problems with the voting system, there are 14 of us. All 14 will be voting, not because we wept. We actually believe in this policy.
Thank you, Councillor Eddy. I'd now like to call on Councillor Sarah Classic to speak on behalf of the Liberal Democrat group.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. So while we are happy from, again, like Councillor Eddy has stated, for the majority of this report, the ratio of the highest to lowest paying staff only includes permanent staff and does not include agency or consultants. And the pay policy continues to publish historically inaccurate pay ratios because of the use of overpaid consultants within this council. I'm happy to note that HR have committed to working with the committee to find ways forward for this pay policy, and I hope that next year it's a much more positive outcome. But for now, the Liberal Democrats will be abstaining on this policy.
Don't boast. Thank you. I'd now like to go to Councillor Gary Hopkins to speak on behalf of the Knoll Community Party.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I too will be voting against this. For some years, several of us on the HR committee were pointing out that there were people who paid monstrous amounts of money, but were on so-called temporary contracts. That included somebody in a senior management position in this council, in charge of a large number of employees, and being in that position for not a month or two, but years. And bluntly, that means that the whole thing was tainted. Now, I appreciate that there's a government guidelines on what should be produced, but that in no way stops things being produced the way the government says, and then with a rider pointing out the real position in reality, because unless the public out there are outraged by some of the huge pay that goes to so-called consultants, and if it's a matter of a few days or a couple of weeks or something on a contract, that's one thing. But when it's a long-term situation where they're effectively in charge of management and departments, it is utterly ridiculous to leave them out from the calculations. So I'll be voting against this.
Present. Thank you. Mayor Rees, have you got even to comment?
I'm still writing his material.
Thank you. So now we could go back to Councillor Francis. You have the right to reply.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I actually wasn't going to, but I am now. I think the thing that springs to mind is when I hear councillors say, we've been here for decades and this situation's been ongoing for as long as I've been a councillor. So I do sort of think to myself, so what have we done about it over the last 20, 30 years? So it's not ideal. It's something that, as the new chair of HR and other fellow committee members, we are all passionately engaged in trying to look at this. So hopefully by 2024, we can address this situation which we are left to manage. So I thank Kerry for your report, and we will be voting for this policy with the caveat that the committee will continue to work on changing the system as it stands. Thank you very much.
Okay, so I think this time what we're going to try is we're going to have for an aye, nay and abstain, but with a show of hands, just to make sure that we see. Yeah. Nevertheless, that we can model. Okay, so all those in favour of accepting this report, please raise your hands and say aye. Aye. Put your hands down. Thank you. All of those against, raise your hands and say nay. Put your hands down. All of those abstaining, put your hands up and say abstain. Oh. Okay. So, it does feel a bit like a year 5 lesson, I'm afraid. Always. Thank you. Okay, the recommendation is approved. We have 34 for, 15 against and 5 abstentions for the record. Thank you. No. Okay. We now... the text says it's time for an adjournment. The mood in the room says it's break time. So there will now be an adjournment for 20 minutes, which means that we need you back here promptly at, definitely in your seats and ready to go at 10 past. Refreshments for councillors are in the rooms along the hall, and we will start again by 10 past. Thank you. Take our seats, please. Let's get this show back on the road. As they say in the pubs in Ireland, if there's no homes to go to. Thank you. I'm going to start the second half of the meeting now. Heather, I'm going to start the second half of the meeting now. Thank you. I know. Okay, so now I say the official welcome back. We now know that the meeting is likely to run past the 2.5 hours allowed within the Constitution. Therefore, please, can I move a motion to extend the time to hear the remaining reports and the golden motion? And that would be an estimated extra 20 minutes, allowing that we finish at 9:10. Correct? Thank you. Can I take that? That's both motions. Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Yes, both motions, the gold and the silver, all done and dusted by 9:10. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Thank you. Anyone against? Thank you. Okay. Let's put a stop to this joviality, please. Agenda item 13, golden motion. Tackling knife crime and the causes of knife crime in Bristol. The motion will be shown on the screen in the room during the proposing speech. So now, I'd like to invite Councillor Mohammed Makawi of the Green Group to move the motion. Okay.
Thank you, your Lord Mayor. I rise to propose this motion which call upon full council to express its full support for tackling knife crime and the cause of knife crime in Bristol. The issue is close to my heart, as my friend Adam Ali Ibrahim, a recent victim of knife crime in Castle Park on the 31st of January, I feel emotional about bringing this motion to full council. I know how it feels to lose people in your life, a son, sister, brothers, friends, or someone you know closely or from distance. When people pass away tragically and suddenly, the effects are felt deep. No matter how hard we try to forget about it, it can leave a deep psychologically and emotional scar time will not erase. We all wish that there is just one thing that we could do to stop the violence, but are no shortcut, and there is no one single solution. Tackling serious violence requires coordinated action on multiple fronts. That is all at the heart of my motion. We must give Bristol young people the future they deserve, the hope to do good in their life, the tool to build their life and their community and the country, not the tool to kill each other and end up either under the ground or behind bars. Scotland has had a great deal of success in reducing violence crime by treating it like a public health issue and using an all-agency approach as the World Health Organization supports, this including prevention activity such as education and early intervention, coupled with appropriate law enforcement as necessary. It has led to a significant reduction in violence crime rate, particularly among young people. As Raba and Orsa Akala pointed out in 2019, gang violence is not a new phenomenon, but moral panics about youth crime push politicians towards the wrong solution. For a long time, the social indicator of that violence have remained the same: poverty, domestic abuse, and lack of education. I don't believe increasing police number and tougher prison sentence are or ever have been the solution to this problem. To tackle the underlying cause of violence, we need all parts of public sector to work together and prioritize it. I urge everyone in the chamber to support this motion. Politics can divide us, but there was ever an issue to unite us or our effort and inspire us to stand together, then surely this is it. There are a lot of things the government can do better to help reduce youth violence and knife crime. I have tried to focus my motion on steps we can agree on as council and the city to tackle this issue. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you. I'd now like to ask Councillor Annie Stafford-Townsend of the Green Group to second the motion.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. So Mohammed has spoken passionately about the impact on him personally of knife crime. I too have been personally impacted, because that's the awful thing about knife crime. It's not something that just like happens over there in a different part of the city to other people. It can happen anywhere, and sometimes with the deadly consequences despite the aims of the person holding the knife. And that's why things like having bleed kits widely accessible with people trained to use them is vital for saving lives. And it's why tackling known hotspots with increased lighting and safer layouts is critical. But it starts before that. And we know that school exclusions have long-term life implications, and that exclusions are more common when not accessing needed support. I know from my own lived experience of growing up neurodiverse in a working-class family in Bristol who believed that being autistic was a terrible negative thing to be, how damaging it is to prevent children like me from accessing the support that we needed. I watched my family members be prevented from accessing support, to be excluded, and as a result getting involved in knife crime. More than 3 or 4 decades later, these views are still too prevalent in our city, and we must do everything that we can to change that perception. And we must ensure that every child, especially the most vulnerable, can access the support that they need. And we need to name it to do that. And we understand that knife crime and drugs are closely linked. And we haven't focused upon this in our original motion because we understand that the administration feel that they're doing all that they can within current government legislation. However, as Greens, we would wish to end the prohibition of drugs and create a safe legal system of regulation to minimise the harms associated with drug use, production and supply as part of an inclusive, supportive and socially just society that protects the most vulnerable people from the harms of the drug supply. And we need to work towards working together as councillors, trusting that councillors understand the local situation, rather than excluding councillors from multi-agency meetings to work on issues, rather than removing the call for councillors to be involved as has happened with the amendment that's coming. We should all be working together on this and many other issues. And we need to think creatively about how we support the grassroots projects that are doing fantastic work with young people, like the Trojan Free Fighters in Lawrence Hill Ward, that are doing it entirely off their own steam. This was a friendly motion aimed at strengthening and supporting the work already being done here in Bristol. And whilst we as Greens in the administration would do something slightly differently, we do appreciate, please do appreciate that we share the goal of keeping our children and our city safe. And there's also really good positive actions in the pipeline that will help prevent the causes of knife crime, and we want those to be prioritised. And there's other actions that aren't in the pipeline. And as nobody has a monopoly on good ideas, we urge you to work with us and not in conflict, because collaborative working is the key to good solution, the best and the very best future that we can hope for Bristolians. Thank you. Please vote for the motion.
Thank you. There has been an amendment from the Labour Group which has been published online as a supplement to this meeting earlier this afternoon. I'd now like to ask Councillor Ellie King of the Labour Group to move the amendment.
Thank you for bringing forward this motion, and I just want to offer my condolences on the death of your friend. I'm sure this is an issue that is of concern to everyone in this chamber, and the core sentiment is something, of course, we can wholeheartedly support. Whilst taking on board the goodwill of this motion, there are several reasons why we felt it needed considerable amendments to make it reflect the sheer depth and breadth of the challenge we face, of the partnership work that is already happening across the city, and to bring in additional points to consider. The funding for safer options and specialist exploitation services has been maintained in 23-24, despite the financial challenges of this year. Through this, we fund a series of interventions, including ones that support serious violence prevention for children with SEND, commissioning a wide range of VCSE organisations to deliver mentoring, family support and youth outreach, funding targeted mental health services and domestic abuse services for young people affected by serious violence, and a specialist young women and girls serious violence worker in the city. This gives a flavour of the work that Safer Options does and reflects how high it is on our agenda. There are further commitments in the original motion which we had to question. Drugs and alcohol gets a core funding of just under a quarter of the public health grant. That's almost 10 million. In addition, we've had supplementary funding of 5 million per year for 2 years, and we are set to receive significantly more. This is significant. Funding isn't the main issue here. We would not want to limit ourselves to giving funding to the 2 projects in the original motion, which were already well resourced. Just last month, we passed a budget. 4 weeks later, here we are being asked to find additional money to put into Safer Options. How much, where from, and what specifically for? If this is the priority issue that you say it is as a Green Party, then where is the amendment in the budget process that gives us the detail we need to make it happen? Ironically, during the same budget process, we did have a Green Party amendment on redirecting strategic SIL, which came with a health warning from officers that this risks diverting resource away from projects like the Castle Park redevelopment. That is a project essential to improving the safety of a key central park that will require significant resource to do so. Yet that amendment asked us to take money from that pot and put it elsewhere. And here we are today with a motion that asks us to commit to implementing the Castle Park plans as soon as they are ready. Resource is finite, so where is the accountability? With the support of this amendment, we will also undertake a serious violence strategic needs assessment for both Bristol and the wider Avon-Somerset area. This will enable us to be evidence-led when defining our serious violence interventions for Bristol. And this will come on top of a new commitment to spend £655,000 upgrading CCTV on HRA land. A key point about this amendment is reiterating that any approach to tackling knife crime needs to be proactive as well as reactive. We can and will address blind spots, but we also take the opportunity to get upstream and work to ensure that they are designed out of our built environment. This is why we want to ensure the Keeping Bristol Safe partnership feeds into the local plan to do just that. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like now to call on Councillor Marley Bennett to second the amendment.
First, I'd like to thank Councillor Mackay for bringing this important motion forward and to offer the condolences on behalf of, I'm sure, the entire chamber on the death of your friend, Adam Ali Ibrahim, and to you too, Councillor Stafford Townsend. It's a tragedy that a life can be so needlessly taken, and as we've heard tonight in the contributions from the Bristol youth councillors, this has happened on too many occasions in Bristol. As a council and as a city, we must do everything in our power to tackle knife crime. This means combating the driving causes from poverty, isolation, exposure to violence and domestic abuse for young people, and failures in the education and care systems. We must also challenge someone who decides to carry a knife, be it out of a misguided belief it's needed for their own protection. It has been proven that people carrying a knife are more likely to be harmed themselves, and a knife means that any altercation may become fatal in a second. The original motion has some really important parts which we support, particularly the commitment to extend the coverage of bleed kits, potentially life-saving measure. Our Labour amendment seems to strengthen the original motion in several ways. Some of it is simply to tighten up the wording where necessary. This includes removing a section which appeared to suggest a link between neurodivergence and knife crime, which had caused some concerns. We've also added additional context that explains better the multifaceted driving causes of knife crime and the disproportionate impact it has on some communities. Our amendment also removes a line committing us to work with the police to, quote, identify licensed premises which fuel antisocial behaviours at the root of knife carrying and review the licence compliance. We need to be careful about the language we choose on this. The issues we have with knife crime are not related to a particular venue, and it's important we don't blame the sector unfairly. Instead, what we are doing is working collaboratively with the nighttime economy sector, taking preventative action to keep people safe. Our harm reduction policy makes clear the expectation of venues when they encounter weapons. Our amendment notes this and the other successful campaigns, from the Bristol Rules campaign, the rollout of anti-drink spiking kits and the Women's Safety Charter, and commits us to going further still. In fact, we are already providing bleed kits to licensed premises, and we hope to roll out specialist first aid training, which would increase the availability of trained emergency first responders. These campaigns have already won international recognition, and this has only been possible thanks to the active participation of venues. Our amendment also seeks to go further than the original motion, and by adding a commitment for the Keeping Bristol Safe partnership to feed into the local plan consultation, it offers us the real opportunity to eradicate blind spots from Bristol's built environment. In addition, it resolved to increase support for young people, work directly with community groups to combat knife crime from the bottom up, and to improve information sharing between agencies. To conclude, our friendly amendment significantly strengthens the original motion, better ensuring Bristol does everything it can to eradicate knife crime from our city. I trust it will win support across this chamber. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Okay, so now we're going to hear from speakers on the amendment. And first of all, I'd like to call on Councillor Annie Stafford-Townsend to speak on behalf of the Green Group.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. So, I mean, we are quite disappointed that you've not spoken to us in advance of bringing this amendment. It would have been great if actually you spoke to us last week and we could have had an altered amendment, an altered motion that we could have worked on together, and with the shared goals that we definitely have. Because this was a friendly motion aimed to strengthen your hand and to work collaboratively. And as you've mentioned the budget, you know that we weren't particularly involved with the Mayor's budget. It wasn't Council's budget, it was the Mayor's budget. And, you know, that is a problem. But your politics and strategy doesn't just happen in February, it happens all year round. And if this chamber is going to be more than just the stage for a pantomime, then it requires year-round conversations, suggestions and cross-party working. I've also noted in my years in this chamber that the administration is very good at finding pots of money when it suits them, normally at a by-election time. It's disappointing and problematic to remove the references to the drug approach, as the two issues are very closely linked. But again, we understand that the administration is doing everything that they can within current legislation. I think it's very important actually to, when it comes to neurodiversity and special educational needs, that we name the issue in order to tackle it. We can't pretend it's not a thing that's there. And it's disappointing that whilst lighting will become more energy efficient, that the commitment to improve lighting in known dark areas has been removed. It's also disappointing that the local knowledge of councillors is being removed from this motion to feed into local hotspots and to work collaboratively together, because we have to work collaboratively together in order to make the best outcomes for our city and our residents and for everybody coming and being born and growing up in the future years, because the years aren't going to get any easier. Councillors are already excluded from multi-agency meetings, and yeah, that hasn't always been the case. When I was a councillor before, I was able to go to those. And the exclusion of anybody with skills or knowledge is detrimental to good outcomes. So we have to start working together. The opportunity was to do that and talk to us and have an altered motion tonight, but that's not where we are. And therefore, as a result, we feel that this amendment weakens the original motion and we will not be supporting it.
Thank you. I'd like to call on Councillor Graham Morris to speak on behalf of the Conservative Group.
Thank you, my Lord Mayor. So the general premise of this motion is absolutely right. After all, we all want to reduce knife crime in the city, help turn others away from taking a life and ruining their own lives in the process. As repeated previously, my thoughts and condolences go to the family and friends of Adam, Ali, Ibrahim, as well as all those who have suffered in such, died in such violent and senseless circumstances. Turning to the original motion, it was very busy, and I felt there was too much in there. It felt like it was a mix between a budget amendment, a motion, a still application for funding in green represented areas, and an opportunity to rid the city of bus stop adverts. All this busyness and distraction reduced the impact of the message. The amendment offered by the Labour Party, whilst not perfect, is simpler and clearer. The main drawback with this motion is that it's removed all reference to engaging with local councillors, and it's disappointing that they continue to ignore the knowledge and experience that we have. I also feel when it comes to motions that are city-wide, we should not reference particular areas of the city, because we should be using the evidence to determine where the crime is and then trying to find resources to deal with those issues, not naming particular areas which may not be the worst areas in the city. So as a group, we are keen to support motions which have the intention to bring about positive change. And we would have supported either, but tonight we're supporting the Labour motion because it's clearer. I'm sure that everyone here finds the thought of losing a loved one to knife crime upsetting and distressing. I remember 18 years ago, a good friend of mine I played rugby with was stabbed to death whilst working in Easton. His memory lives on at the rugby club. As the father of 4 teenage boys between the ages of 18 and 14, I worry for them. I worry for all the children in this city. Young people in some ways are the most important members of society because they are the future. We have a moral duty to guide and support and to help them. The world is not easy, and people of all ages have choices which they have to make. Our role, the city's role, is to help people make the right choices. The old adage is that it takes a village to raise a child has never been truer. The police are having some success in reducing the upward trend in knife crime. They also say education is a key part of the work. Knife crime can affect all age groups, but it is the 12 to 24 age group that is the group most likely to carry a knife and also fall victim to violence involving one. But imagine how much worse things would be if it wasn't for the dedication and commitment of the hundreds and thousands of people who give up their time freely during the week and weekends, whether it's sporting activities or actually youth club activities, to try and provide the distraction and the diversion needed and the engagement for our young people. If we are serious about reducing knife crime, maybe we should launch a campaign. I'd like to thank Councillor Sharon Scott for informing me about the Knife Angel, a 27 foot high... Could I just ask you to start wrapping up now, please? Thank you, my Lord Mayor. Made of over 100,000 seized knives. So in short, we will support the amended motion and we wish the city well in its success. Thank you, my Lord Mayor.
Thank you. I'd now like to call on Councillor Andrew Brown to speak on behalf of the Liberal Democrat group.
I think you'll find it's me, Lord Mayor.
Okay.
Thank you very much. So we welcome the amendment, which we believe strengthens the motion and removes some of the troubling wording that we found within the original motion. I want to just point out a few areas of interest that we think add to the debate. I was looking at the Ofsted report into children's services published last week, and within that there was quite clear praise for the innovative Weapons in Schools programme, and that report states that which aims to prevent children from being criminalised should they bring weapons into school, and it says it's highly effective. The programme has helped ensure that fewer children experience school moves, suspensions, and probably most importantly, exclusions. This keeps them in sight of key adults and professionals and protective measures. The relationship between exclusions and knife crime is clearly emphasised within the motion. I think that's a very, very important thing because it is a vicious circle that children can quickly be caught up in. And then actually I was looking at our own policy guidance to schools regarding weapons when they are found in schools. And in there was quite an interesting measure called Outcome 22, which is when children are obviously referred to the police because of the incident of a weapon being found, the first reaction of the police will be to actually look at using what's called an out-of-court disposal panel. So rather than being a criminal record, it's done outside of the judicial system to try to give that person, that young person, another chance. And again, at the early stages, try to make sure we don't get caught in this vicious circle. But we need to be clear that there is an issue of community safety, and in particular the safety of young people. Often they themselves are the victims of knife crime. Knife crime is a problem across our city. In my own ward, I attended a meeting just a few weeks ago with businesses and the police. And at that meeting, we were informed that some children, as young as 12 years old, had been seen in the area carrying knives. That is pretty scary. And it was clear, we've not yet seen the impact, admittedly, of the recruitment of the new police officers. But there just isn't enough police and PCSOs at a neighbourhood level. And we sort of know that policing at the neighbourhood level are the most likely to be able to engage young people, bring in non-escalationary measures. So hopefully we can avoid getting to that stages where knives are pulled out and young people are stabbed and we see lives lost. We agree that other community responses can be an effective way to reduce knife crime. So again, in our own area, there's a group of local mums called Fun for Families. And I know the police recommend them a great deal to do youth intervention work. But this grassroots group have virtually no funding, yet they actually are making an impact.
Can I ask you to wrap up, please, Councillor?
I will. As a group, we support the motion, but we will also be supporting the amendment. Thank you.
Okay. I'm going to go directly now to Councillor King to ask if she would like to respond as the mover of the amendment.
Yeah, just briefly, thank you. So just a few things. I'm not aware of any meetings that you've been excluded from. I've never, since before this motion, received a single email from yourselves saying that you were interested in this and you wanted to be involved in meetings on that. So if you want to, then please get in touch and we can set some things up. We can set up some briefings, but that was news on me. In terms of talking about the motion and its amendment, we offered an altered motion on Friday morning, and we were told no, that it was too late, even though it was 4 days ahead of this meeting. That's what we offered. So we don't know what's happened there with your group, but I think 4 days should be an adequate time, considering you've got the weekend as well to talk over these things. It's more time than we usually get as a group. On the neurodiversity point, I felt the need to pull that into a broader context because I think we risked conflating several things there, and I just wanted to be careful about the wording of that. So I brought it into a phrase called the needs of the individual, so we could talk about their mental health and also the context in which and the drivers that cause serious youth violence. And we know that above all, poverty is the cause of this stuff. So if I was going to approve a strategy on anything, it would be a poverty strategy, especially looking at the years that we've gone through recently and the increased need that's gone through in this country, and how it is poverty that is the foundation of all these problems. Slightly cheeky of a Conservative to point out the need for more youth clubs, I'm afraid. It is under your government that we are in this situation, and the decline of youth provision has gone massively downhill because of the Tories. Yeah, absolutely. I don't even think that's up for debate. Look at the evidence and look at the amount of youth clubs that have closed in over the past 12 years. That is a Conservative-driven agenda. Okay. I'd just say also, I suppose, as a final point, it's important to be evidence-led. It's important to do needs analysis and not go from our own personal experience. As traumatic and as horrendous that must be, there's plenty on this bench that have also had experience of serious knife crime as well. And I have absolutely 100% sympathy for anyone who's going through that. And I wish that you get all the support that you need with that. But we have to be evidence-led with our interventions. We need to look at South Bristol. There's an incredible amount of serious violence that happens there. We can't just focus on the city centre, I'm sorry. And there's all the peripheral areas of the city that also need attention. So to just focus on the city centre as the original motion suggested was just not acceptable to me. Thanks.
Thank you.
Can I ask for a point of order very quickly? We didn't get that amendment. We asked for it, and we were waiting for it by Friday. It never arrived. We waited.
I don't think this is point of order.
We asked for it, and it never came.
But I don't think I'm being told by the monitoring officer that it's not a point of order. It's not something that you can take from the floor. It's business outside the meeting.
Could have been sent.
Okay. I think this is both statements were made. They've been heard. I think it's something that it's outside the meeting. I don't think we can do anything about it now. We can tit for tat about whether it was or it wasn't, but it's not going to be resolved as a point of order within the meeting. So therefore, I don't think it is a point of order.
Sorry, Lord Mayor, can I just say we have this in evidence if we need a written version of this to say that it was too late. Just for clarification, we've got that written down as a message. in a Teams meeting message.
To be honest, I don't think that this is something that we can have in this.
I agree, but it's as it's on the webcast. I just feel the need to come back on that.
Well, I mean, you know, we're opening up a topic that cannot be completely finalised because this is not a forensic opportunity. It's only what comes out of the meeting that should be brought up as a point of order. So I think, you know, whether it's fair or unfair, these things have now been said, they've been recorded, and I think we just move on. Mayor Rees, do you want to make any comments?
No, I think Ellie and Marley have said all that's needed to be said, and I thank them for their work on this.
Okay, so I revert now to Councillor McCowie. Would you like to respond to the mover, as the mover of the original motion?
Yes, I do, yeah. Firstly, is false claim. We never receive anything. I'm the motion mover, and I contact Councillor King.
Do you know what, Councillor, I think I am actually going to just urge both sides to stop saying whatever happened about these emails. We can't.
She sent it on Friday.
Well, you've got 3 minutes to talk about your motion, and I think that, you know, we can either spend all this time saying about emails that we can't verify it in this meeting. So, as the chair of this meeting, there's nothing else I can do, and I urge you to speak to your motion now at this point.
Okay, the Labour amendment, which I don't support, and my group don't support it, because it doesn't add anything to our motion, which is our motion is strong and clear, and they claim there is language and not naming areas. These areas called hotspot, where is the crime is from. So when we name the areas, we name it because we want the council to do something about it, and because it is where is this knife crime committed more and over again. So we are not naming just this area for nothing. Anyway, let us do the right things, and it's about saving money. It's about saving life, not saving money. And I urge the chamber to vote for this motion, and I hope they will, and I know they're going to vote for the amended motion, which we are going to vote against. Thank you very much.
Okay, so now we're going to vote on the amendment. I think we can do it from having listened to the points made in various speeches. I think we are on solid ground to do this as an aye/nay vote with a show of hands. So those of you who are in favour of the amendment to the motion, could you please raise your hands and say aye? Aye. Are you going to count? Keep your hands up. Okay. Those who are against the amendment, raise your hands and say nay. Okay. If there are any abstentions, can you raise your hands? And say abstain. There are no abstentions. Thank you. Okay, so the amendment passes with 35 votes for and 20 against and no abstentions. Thank you. So I can therefore declare the result as the motion has been carried as amended.
Lord Mayor, that was the amendment.
We're going to vote again. Okay. Sorry. It's not written down. Oh, yes. Yeah, okay. I did sort of slightly shortcut it there. So we're going to have to vote again. There was a suggestion we were going to go for a named vote, but I decided that we could go by a show of hands for the amendment. And now we have to vote again on the motion as amended might be fairly similar. So those of you who are in favour of the amended motion, can you please put your hands up and say aye? Aye. Oh, that's lovely. Okay. You're voting on the amended motion. So you're voting on the original motion. If I can just explain. You're voting on the Green motion amended by the Labour motion, and you are voting to pass that. Okay, all in favour of passing this knife crime motion to save Bristol from knife crime, as amended by the Labour, put your hands up. So, aye, thank you. Put your hands down. Anybody against the motion, put your hands up and say against. Okay. And anybody who's abstaining, and this is just a format. No? Okay, we've got the amended motion has been carried. Thank you. Moving swiftly on, thank you, to item number 13, which is a Silver motion. We are on track to finish at 9:10, so let's make sure we do this. Changes to district car parks. The motion will be shown on the screen in the room. If we could just pay attention. Thank you, shouldn't say that. The motion will be shown on the screen in the room during the proposing speech. I would like to ask Councillor Jonathan Hucker of the Conservative Group to move the motion.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I believe the decision to introduce charges in 10 district car parks and dispose of another 4 is mistaken. At a time when we are trying to protect the sustainability of our independent retailers, this move is counterproductive. The car park in my own ward, Stockwood, is one that has been earmarked for disposal. Not surprisingly, I have received many complaints from residents about this. My colleagues have also received complaints about the decision to dispose of the car parks at Clayton Street and Ridingleys, and to introduce charges at Beechwood Road, Crow Lane, Westbury Hill and Waverley Road. The apparent justification for disposing of the car park in Stockwood is that it is underused. This is nonsense, but you don't need to take my word for it. The Bristol World journalist Mark Taylor visited to see for himself. His article was headlined, "The Shopping Community in Bristol Facing the Future Without a Public Car Park." The article stated, "On the morning Bristol World visited, the car park at Harden Road was busy, with locals using it to visit the nearby shops. Nick had just parked in the council car park to visit the shops around the corner. He said, 'I park here to use the shops regularly. The car park is ideal because it is free and I'm not here for hours. I literally nip into the local stores picking up a few essential items for the family. If I didn't park here, I'd find myself parking on the main road, which isn't ideal because you get dual parking, buses and commercial vehicles parking. The car park is essential. My 2 boys went to the local school and the car park was essential for parking away from the school. The local doctor's surgery has a car park, but it's not huge, so a lot of people park here when they go there for appointments. The car park is integral to the economic success of the local shops because they wouldn't survive without it, but it's also required for road safety reasons. I agree with Nick. The decision to introduce charges or to close some car parks was taken without consultation with residents and councillors, and little or no account was taken of the equalities impacts. Stockwood Ward has the second highest proportion of residents over the age of 70 in the city, and the second highest proportion of residents whose daily activities are considerably limited by health conditions. These people will suffer. The budget contained nothing in respect of capital receipts from the sale of car parks, so this element can easily be reversed. We need to revisit this policy and let common sense prevail. We sincerely hope the Mayor or the Cabinet Transport Lead will be flexible and receptive enough to make some sensible modifications. Please support our motion.
Thank you. I'd now like to ask Councillor Sharon Scott of the Conservative Group to second the motion.
My Lord Mayor, it's been well publicised that 10 free car parks across the city will become pay and display in the autumn. These car parks are located in numerous wards across the city, so this issue affects a large number of councillors here today. The largest has 104 spaces and is in my ward. Westbury has a thriving high street with the only banks in North Bristol that are used by customers from outside the area, such as Henbury, Southmead and Horfield. Parking charges will no doubt influence people to park on the streets, impacting local residents. Focusing on the community, the large primary care centre, Holy Trinity Church and the Methodist Church are all either on the car park itself or minutes away. Apart from 2 weekly services, the Methodist Church acts as a community hub and has a weekly footfall of over 2,000. There are all the uniform groups, Alcoholics Anonymous, Bristol Ballet Centre, Humon and a drama group to name a few. There is also a food bank and a Ukrainian hub, which are both vital services. What message is the council giving to volunteers who give up their own time to help, then to be charged for the privilege? From a health and safety perspective, the largest number of users are children. The Methodist Church adheres to a strict safeguarding policy that means children must be dropped off and collected at the door. Charging parents each time this occurs is unfair. Holy Trinity Church have their own congregation. There are people who work in or are patients at the primary care centre. Is the council really going to charge people to worship or see a doctor? So as you see, this car park is used by many. It is a vital part of Bristol life, and it's not just for the residents of BS9 who can apparently afford to pay all extra charges, which some ill-informed councillors in this chamber seem to believe. I understand the council wants to generate revenue, but it is the charging structure that is of concern. I don't believe that this scheme should be used as a tax on daily life. Instead, my group proposes that the Mayor should compromise. We need a consultation and a proper debate on the first hour being free, no annual permits and free parking on Sundays. My plea to the Mayor and the Cabinet Member is to meet with us to find a workable solution and discuss a compromise. The car parks in the suburbs are vital to the communities. As with Westbury, the Waverley Road car park in Sharhampton supports the local surgery, high streets and community groups, as do those in Avonmouth and Henbury. Simply bringing in charges without consultation will harm our communities and local economies. Please support this motion. Thank you, my Lord Mayor.
Thank you. This motion has been amended from the Green Group, which was published online as a supplement to this meeting earlier this afternoon. I'd now like to ask Councillor Ed Plowden of the Green Group to move the amendment.
Thank you, my Lord Mayor. I rise to propose an amendment to this motion. There are 2 issues covered by this motion, and we're bringing an amendment to support some of the motion's positive elements, consultation, but to oppose the principle of free parking. If there's no such thing as a free lunch, then we have to recognise that free parking imposes costs on everyone but the driver. First, consultation. We're seeing too much selling and long leasing of valuable public land without consultation across the country and in Bristol. The Green Party would like to see local people more involved in decisions like this, so we support the call for more consultation. Secondly, free parking. The Conservatives want to take some of the most valuable real estate that the council owns, parking, and to give free access to it for private car owners. It's good to hear that actually there's a maybe slightly more nuanced position there, but what we think that this approach runs counter to what we think is right for vibrant, sustainable neighbourhoods, let alone the need to reduce volumes of car traffic by 40% by 2030 in Bristol, as calculated by the university. Bristol Citizens' Assembly recognised the pivotal role that reducing parking can play in rebalancing our transport system. And let's be clear, we can reduce parking and still ensure that the people who most need it, such as older and disabled people, can still park and access vital services. And finally, I think the big pity here is that we still have no proper citywide strategy for parking, which means we end up focusing on a few car parks rather than a proper strategic approach to regulating and intervening in a market for very limited and much sought after space. So I commend this amendment to you in the hope that you agree it improves it.
Thank you. I'd now like to ask Councillor Heather Mack to second the amendment.
Thank you very much. I've just got a few brief points, mostly in response to the initial Conservative speakers. You talked about road safety, about needing that car parking off the road. I don't think anything about encouraging people to take those short journeys by providing free parking is good for road safety. It's more cars on the road. You also said something about parking on the road wouldn't be ideal, and then that the car park was essential. So even the importance of this in your own language, is it ideal? Is it not ideal? Is it essential? That didn't really add up as, it being essential. Less cars and pedestrianisation is found to improve spending, improve local high streets. There is a load of evidence for that. You made claims about those car parks being essential for those high streets, that car parking. I'd love to see some evidence about, what would happen if that car parking was taken out, the fewer cars. Do you have evidence or just a gut feeling that those car parks are essential? And just building on what Ed was saying about driving costs to society, you've talked a lot about the costs on the drivers. For every £1 spent on driving, spent on your car, society pays £9 through health impacts, through traffic impacts, through people not getting out and about. So we're talking about costs. It's not just costs on the drivers versus costs on the whole society. And in this room, we make decisions based on the whole society and what we subsidise. And I am not prepared to use council land to subsidise that free parking for those parts of society. We need to look at the whole of Bristol and what we're spending that money on. Thank you.
Thank you. We're now going to hear from speakers on the amendment. And first of all, I'd like to call on Councillor Steve Pearce to speak on behalf of the Labour Group.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I feel like I'm having a bit of a deja vu. I thought we'd had this debate. Or is it actually the 28th of February budget full council still? Have I dreamt the last 3 weeks? If so, at least I can look forward to Bristol City beating Manchester City. And I think that the England cricket team are in with a decent shot against Bangladesh. I wasn't going to mention the rugby team.
Mention the Bears.
Jokes aside, everyone here knows that balancing the books, 13 years into Tory austerity, you didn't think you were going to get away with that, I know, should recognise this. They wanted the parking charges reversed, and the most palatable way they could fund this was by raiding the council tax reduction scheme. Funding free car parks off the backs of the city's worst off. I didn't think we'd get an opportunity to re-litigate that point, but 3 weeks later we do. What's changed in those 3 weeks? Well, we've planted over 16,000 trees since 2016, but the magic money tree didn't put in an appearance in those 16,000. If we can find a cost-neutral way to maintain these car parks, then we're happy to do it. We've already said this, although I have to say, I view through narrowed eyes any apparent concern about access to health services when senior politicians from the Tory party have been calling for patients to be charged to see a GP anyway. It's worth remembering that in Bristol, all badge holders are exempt from parking charges. This is not the case elsewhere. As a reminder, if you're travelling by bus, you'd have to pay £2, and the proposed parking fee at these car parks is £1 per hour. These car parks aren't free to maintain. By keeping them free, you're subsidising motorists, inherently at the expense of other forms of transport. I'm surprised the Green Party don't recognise that, though maybe. I'm dragging us kicking and screaming back to the wording that we're addressing rather than the speeches. But as the budget showed, there's a degree of fitness about making decisions that might be unpopular. They're sticking with that tactic. The Green Party changes changes wording, but not the bit about this council resolves, which is the important bit. To sum up, we won't support this amendment, but we won't support the original motion either. But like I say, we will support cost-neutral ways to maintain these car parks. Thank you, my Lord Mayor.
Thank you. I'd now like to call on Councillor Mark Weston to speak on behalf of the Conservative Group.
I'll try and do an impression, my Lord Mayor. No,
you'll have to put on weight.
But I don't think I can. Thank you, my Lord Mayor. First of all, I want to start by saying thank you, Sharon, for an absolutely stunning speech. Thank you. Sharon had actually read the motion, not least because she helped to draft it. But I have to point out to others that it appears you haven't. Now, I say that addressing my comments to Ed, for whom I have the most enormous respect. And Ed, you and a number of your colleagues have actually educated me into realising the points you're making about car usage. I understand that. But we worded this motion so carefully. We don't want it to be political because we're speaking for our local community, whatever party they vote for. We don't want it to be political because if we make political points to either Marvin or Steve or Don, then you certainly wouldn't want to talk to us. We don't want to do that. But Ed, the point we made was that we believe we can come up with a sustainable proposal that can produce the same level of income, but not penalise those who need to use the car park for visits to the surgery, visits briefly to banks and shops, and visits to community groups briefly. We believe by charging more for the time after that, we can ensure that the income level remains. That's what the community wants to discuss. Even if the administration doesn't want to discuss it with the councillors, please discuss it with our residents. Because actually, what is proposed will damage our community, will damage the businesses, will actually reduce the potential footfall through the village, and therefore reduce the parking income. There is one really big flaw in what the council has assumed in this. It first of all assumes that all our residents are affluent, and secondly it assumes that only our residents use the car park. Both of those are totally flawed. Councillors Massey and Dudd know how many of their residents use our car park. I'm not expecting Councillor Dudd to break the Labour Party whip and vote with us, but I'd ask you, Kai and Tom, from your ward as well, please, please, please encourage your colleagues to talk with our residents about what they need, and our car park users, who happen to be your residents, about what they need to make it accessible for those who are in a position where they cannot afford to park. I just also need to address Councillor Mack for a moment, who's another Green that I used to respect. No, I do respect. But please, what we're talking about is our residents who are 70, 80 and 90, who are not ill enough to need a blue badge, but want to be able to park to go to their doctor's surgery. For goodness sake, show a bit of compassion instead of political ideology and understand what we're after here. Thank you, my Lord Mayor, I said enough, but we'll be opposing the amendment.
I'd like to turn to Councillor Andrew Varney to speak on behalf of the Liberal Democrat group, please.
Thank you, my Lord Mayor. Since 2016, Councillor Clark and I have been working hard to protect and promote our local shopping area, Sandy Park Road in Brislington West. We surveyed hundreds of local residents who said they wanted community events, a more diverse retail offer, and a more pleasant public realm. In response, we set up a residents group, organised regular litter picks, applied for SIL funding for beautiful wooden planters in front of the shops, installed a community notice board, and held Brislington's first community market. We helped Sandy Park Road become an attractive destination that local people wanted to visit rather than drive past on their way to out-of-town shopping centres. We gave retailers the confidence to open new businesses on the road, and in recent years we have a fantastic new bike shop, a new greengrocers and one of the best delis in Bristol. Do please pay a visit. While most people walk or cycle to our shops, and of course we welcome and encourage that, we are lucky enough to have a small community car park for those who need to drive. For example, people making larger purchases, such as picking up dry cleaning on a rainy day, for those with reduced mobility, or for those travelling from further afield to visit our more specialist independent shops that have a bigger catchment area. Unfortunately, as a result of Labour and Green Party councillors voting against our supported bus service amendment in last month's budget, I'm afraid taking the bus is simply not an option for many of our residents. In reality, whether we like it or not, having community car parks to serve our local shopping areas is a vital amenity, and introducing charging or selling them off altogether would likely have a detrimental impact on the viability of our neighbourhood shops. It could be the final nail in the coffin for already struggling businesses that rely on people arriving by car. Furthermore, in many areas we already have a problem with antisocial parking. Introducing charging or losing local car parks may encourage more and more inappropriate parking, such as pavement parking or clogging up residential streets. Rather than introducing punitive charging or selling off these community car parks, we should be enhancing them with EV charging points, more disabled parking bays, secure cycle storage, litter bin provision, local information boards, and better enforcement to deter antisocial behaviour such as littering or loitering. My Lord Mayor, we were unable to support the recent Conservative budget amendment on this issue because of how they were proposing to fund it. However, this motion is an acceptable compromise, and for the reasons I have outlined, the Bristol Liberal Democrats will be supporting it. Unfortunately, the Green Party amendment completely undermines the original motion and fails to recognise the importance of these vital local amenities for our district shopping centres. They are living in cloud cuckoo land if they think that people will switch to more sustainable forms of transport overnight, especially when they themselves limit people's choices by voting against supported bus services. People will simply drive further to out-of-town shopping centres such as Cribbs Causeway with its ample free parking. We cannot support this nonsensical and contradictory Green Party amendment.
Thank you. Okay. So, Councillor Plowden, would you like to respond as mover of the amendment?
Quite a difficult thing to respond to. I think again and again we hear this thing that you're going to kill off the high street, horror stories that small, carefully calibrated parking fees and sustainable transport
Councillor
interventions.
Plowden, could I just ask you to stand? Thank you.
Sustainable transport interventions that try to tackle car dependency will affect the local economy. But as Councillor Mack, Heather has quite rightly said, these are rarely evidenced and often the reverse is true. I doubt really that an hour of free parking is going to cover any costs, because actually probably most of the parking will then be free. I think we really need to take a really good hard look at a strategic approach to parking across the city, which is why we've been talking about a workplace parking levy. It's not fair that the big retailers get to offer huge swathes of free parking, undermining our local high streets. And I think we need to have a really good hard look at that and a proper strategic approach rather than looking at the odd individual local car park. But I am pleased to hear that we're going to have a realistic approach to framing the consultation. And I do think we need to be very, very careful about carefully calibrating this so it does cover its costs. And I would support the approach of offering GPs, as we discussed earlier today in members' forums, tokens for people that they think really need to be able to drive and park for free. But really, I have a feeling, a bit of a feeling of living in a parallel universe tonight. The Labour Party, originally the party of public ownership, privatising land across the city, and on the other hand, the Tory party, the party of the free market and monetisation of assets, opposing privatisation. Very strange. The Greens believe that public goods should be in public ownership and control, and that local people should be consulted and given the information they need to participate in decisions that affect them. Thank you, my Lord Mayor.
Mayor Rees, do you wish to respond to the debate? Okay. Councillor Hucker, would you like to respond as mover of the original motion?
Lord Mayor, just to let you know, I think we're out of time. We're going to need to extend. We're just about on
Well, about a couple of minutes? Well, 5 minutes? Okay. Can we all put your hands up for 5 more minutes, please? Thank you. Anybody against? Perfect. Let's move on so we get out quicker. Thank you. So, where was I? Councillor Hucker, be mindful of the fact that we have just been told that we've only got 5 minutes, so I urge you to be prompt.
Yes, thank you, Lord Mayor. I will be very brief. I think that the arguments for maintaining accessibility to our suburban car parks are compelling. There's equalities. It doesn't disadvantage the elderly or those with impaired mobility. Economic sustainability. It encourages people to use local facilities rather than drive to facilities further away, so it supports the local economy. Environmental sustainability, I would say, because, again, it encourages people to stay local rather than shopping out of town areas. And also road safety, not clogging up the streets with cars when people are making quick visits. The road safety aspect is completely obvious, quite frankly. So I think the arguments for maintaining accessibility are absolutely compelling. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you. Okay, so we're going to have 2 more show of hands votes. First of all, we're going to have a show of hands votes on the amendment. So we need to now vote on the Green Amendment. All those in favour of the Green Amendment, put your hands up and say aye. Aye. All those against the Green Amendment, put your hands up and say nay. Nay. All those who are between 2 minds and are abstaining, put your hands up. Nobody. Nobody between 2 minds. I think we can say that the amendment has failed. So we have had 24, 34 against, and the amendment has failed. So we now need to go to the original motion. Excuse me. So I need you to vote on the original motion as proposed by the Conservatives. All those in favour of the original motion, please put your hands up and say aye. Aye. Quick count. Can you put your hands down? Thank you. All those against the original motion by the Conservatives, put your hands up and say nay. Nay. It's becoming an old joke now. I ignored it the first couple of times. Okay. We got it? And yes, I'm going to go on to that. Put your hands down, and anybody between 2 minds and who's abstaining, put your hand up now. No abstentions. Okay. So, the silver motion, the original motion, has failed with 36 against and 18 for. Thank you. Now, I noticed that some of you had already started packing your bags when Councillor Hucker was summing up. So, please be mindful while I just make my closing remarks. Thank you for being here today. Thank all of you for being here today. The next full council meeting will be held on Tuesday, the 9th of May, 2023, when I will no longer be Lord Mayor. Oh, hang on. Hang on. Oh, I'm not sure if we're going to... Well, actually, we are. There's, I've just read that out. This is what's in the paper. We are actually going to move that date. There's been a bit of confusion as to when the May meeting is going to be, and it can't be that day. So it's going to be another day, the 16th or the 23rd, to be agreed. I think the 16th is most likely. Thank you all very much, bearing with us with no amendments, and good night.